Welcome everyone to the final part of the main story of the God of High School Manhwa series. I can't believe we are almost done with this, and honestly I'm kinda sad that we are nearing its conclusion. Without further ado, let's get this part 7 video started. God of High School's final arc begins moments before we saw Mori and Mujin free-falling towards the new world, aka Renewal Earth, from the vacuum of space. Right now, we spot that the arc isn't doing so well, as it's right in the thick of the same predicament. A world government executive inside the ship gives his allies a status report. The arc is currently in suspension. Even worse is that they've lost all engine power. The agent then gets us up to speed with what will happen to the arc, that at this rate, they'll all be lost in space. At that exact same moment, Mori cleaves Grand Fortress Nirvana with his gigantic rod. And if you've seen the previous parts of this saga, you know what happened after that. Everyone from Mori to Dewi to Mira to the whole host of surviving world government agents on active duty at Grand Fortress Nirvana were thrown off into space. They start free-falling. Mori is left to his own devices as he drifts further from the rest of his allies. Meanwhile, the world government agents seemingly fare better when Dewi spots them and uses his natural force ability to prevent these poor unnamed scrubs from falling to their deaths down to the Renewal Earth. At the same time, Dewi manages to grab Mira while they careen towards Mujin's new world. The problem is that even his natural force isn't enough to prevent all their allies from turning into human meteorites headed for Renewal Earth. Dewi knows this, and all he can do is state the obvious, as he tells himself that each and every one of their comrades are going to get killed if they fall like this. The worst comes to pass, as these poor unnamed operatives and our heroes fall like shooting stars towards Renewal Earth's surface. The story suddenly shifts to Mori having visions of a woman frantically resuscitating him. For a moment, our hero wakes up, but he passes out again as soon as he gains his senses. And then, nothing. At an as-yet unspecified time, Mori wakes up to find out that he's inside a hut. His wounds from the previous battles he's had are already patched up, and our hero notices that there's another severely injured guy beside him in this makeshift shelter. This unnamed dude writhes and groans in pain, and like Mori, he too has bandages all over his body. Our hero spots the poor dude's agonized cries and immediately tries to sit up from his cot, but he instantly feels his wounds getting the better of him, and Mori's forced to lie down again. He then hears a voice asking him if he's awake. Mori turns to see that it's the same woman that he's been having dreams of. She approaches our hero and tells him to take it easy and just rest. After all, she's well aware that Mori's seriously injured right now. Forcing himself would only make his grievous wounds burst open. The lady seems less worried than she is confident. She even tells Mori that she's an expert at this kind of thing, as she plops her sack on the floor and pulls out a blanket to put over our hero. Mori tries to speak to the woman, but he stops mid-sentence when he notices that a couple of kids are present inside the hut, hugging her by the thighs. These aren't just regular tots though. These two kids are the same Generation X children that has been helping Mujin with his genocidal campaign ever since he ascended to godhood. You might even notice that one of them is the same super annoying pink-haired girl who loves nothing more than to butt into grown-ups' business. The two annoying kids give our hero the stink eye. Mori recognizes them, but his train of thought is derailed when the woman starts speaking. She introduces herself as Executive Code Number 0446, and according to her, she used to be a medic working for the world government. 0446 then gives Mori a quick rundown of that crap that has happened ever since he lost consciousness while free-falling through Renewal Earth's atmosphere. As she puts it, everyone including her and Mori made a forced landing on Renewal Earth after Grand Fortress Nirvana got destroyed. Even more, it turns out that they've been marooned in this place for 3 weeks now. 0446 goes on to tell Mori that she wanted to save his friends, but she just couldn't find them at the time. All the while, 0446 feeds the guy beside Mori, as she continues giving him the lowdown of everything that has happened in the 3 weeks he was out of it. 0446 tells our hero how extremely lucky he is that he's still drawing breath even after all the injuries he sustained. But all Mori can think about right now is the forced landing that he and all his allies were, well, forced to make after all the chaos that ensued during his duel with Mujin. 0446 then opens the curtains to their hut to reveal that the old world has pretty much become a wasteland with a cross-shaped crater the size of a continent in it, all thanks to what Mujin did 3 weeks ago. One of the kids, the less annoying boy, shows that he's truly been brainwashed by Mujin's reconditioning when he tells Mori how amazing Renewal Earth and the destruction of the old world are. And just to prove that this kid is really nuts, he even tells our hero that they're currently in the perfect world that Mujin wanted to create, Renewal Earth. But hey, at least the kid's not as insufferable as the pink-haired girl. He genuinely smiles at our hero, while the other kid beside him continues to leer at the Monkey King. On the other hand, 0446 takes this whole Renewal Earth deal in stride. She even explicitly expresses how beautiful the old world looks from this view. But more importantly, she wonders how they're going to get back there. 0446 remains positive and keeps her spirits up for the rest of the group. And she shows that she's a pretty level-headed person when she tells Mori that Renewal Earth might be the reason the old world underwent a mass extinction, but there's no denying this place has a hell of a view too. Later, the two Generation X kids act like typical dead weight and start munching down on what's left of the group's supplies. Mori forces himself to sit up in bed. He successfully does it this time, but he immediately notices that cross-shaped wound on his chest. What's worse is that this same wound, the one that Mugen gave him right at the climax of their recent duel, isn't just skin deep. It has actually reached his heart, branding it with Mugen's trademark Longinus insignia. 0446 tells her hero that she's super amazed that he survived the specific wound. It's a miracle in spite of the fact that Mori is a literal demigod. She speculates that this wound definitely would have been supposed to kill him. But, given Mori's still alive, 0446 wonders if Mugen's mark on Mori's heart is actually a curse of some sort. And it's not like it's the only wound Mori sustained during his battle against his arch-nemesis. All his other injuries are grievous too. But Mori has no time to worry about his own safety, so he instead asks 0446 what happened to Mugen. Sadly, she doesn't know. But what she does know is that if the dude was still alive, he would have already come to kill Mori at this point. 0446 drops the conversation and instead tells our hero to forget about Mugen for now and eat so that he can recover. But our hero has turned into a stereotypical sad boy. He refuses and goes back to bed. In turn, 0446 shows us that her bedside game is on point, as she leaves some food for our hero just in case he decides he's done moping around. Shortly after, 0446 attempts to contact their allies in the old world using an energy stone inside a canister. The Generation X boy gets all up in her business and asks 0446 what she's doing. She tells him that she's trying to communicate with the Earth in the sky, referring to the original Earth. Meanwhile, the boy notices that she's using an energy stone to do it, which impresses 0446, given how observant this kid is. 0446 goes on to explain that simple communication with Earth should be possible with the energy stone if they use the special frequency occurring here on Renewal Earth. And she's doing all this to try and reach not only the people still in the old world, but all the other executives who got scattered here on Renewal Earth. Because as she puts it, she's sure that they're not the only ones who survived the fall. Surprisingly enough, the kid tells 0446 that it won't be easy to use the energy stone to communicate with either the people of the old world or her allies stuck on Renewal Earth. And credit where credit is due, because this kid is actually pretty smart, as he tells 0446 how there's jamming in various buildings that prevent any kind of unpermitted communication. The boy goes on this whole super technical explanation about sending and receiving messages, telling her that internal and external communication would be impossible unless they destroy the central control building situated on Renewal Earth. 0446 asks if the central control building is similar to the old world's Pentagon. The boy clarifies that it's a sort of alarm system that prevents them, the Generation X kids, from contacting anyone outside until they're fully grown. In the end, the kid tells 0446 to just give it up because what she's doing is pointless. She knows when she's beat, so she instead invites the kid to get something to eat. So they go hunting in the forest nearby. She even brings the annoying pink-haired kid along for some reason. Somewhere else, Mori continues to sulk in bed and wonder if the people in the old world are okay. But he tempers his expectations and speculates that the blow their enemies made to Earth was so huge that there's a chance everyone on the old world is probably dead by now. Mori's thoughts then drift towards his best friends, Mira and Daewee, as he starts to wonder if they made it out alive after all the chaos that transpired 3 weeks ago. Then there's Ahan, who he knows was inside the Ark just as it collided with Grand Fortress Nirvana. Let's just say Mori's worried for each and every one of his friends and family, whether it's Dean or Beck or every unnamed world government executive who helped in the fight against Mugen and his brutal regime. In the end, Mori resolves to recover from his wounds as soon as possible to go and look for his people. He gets so caught up in his thoughts that he fails to notice the guy beside him, who tells our hero to not push himself so hard. Mori turns towards the guy, who then tells him that he deserves a bit of a break from all this. After all, he's done enough. The others can take care of themselves. And props to this guy too, because his eyes might be all bandaged up and he's nearly paralyzed from the waist down, but the dude knows how to hype himself up. He tells Mori to just wait a little because he'll beat the hell out of Mugen once he recovers. He even invites Mori to get a piece of the action, telling our hero that he'll give him a signal to kick Mugen's ass after he overwhelms him. This feisty dude then introduces himself as another world government executive codenamed 7054. According to him, he was once known as the Storm of the Wilderness. In any case, 7054 keeps on talking some mad smack, as he monologues about what he'll do to Mugen when he gets his hands on the guy. Of course, Mori's not convinced, so he rudely chuckles at 7054's big talk, as the guy continues to puff his chest and say that Mori should give him credit for his ultimate skill, the Bloodstorm. To his credit, 7054 isn't offended by all this. He's just glad he at least got our hero to laugh again, so he tells Mori to just stop sighing and get some rest. As 7054 puts it, he's an expert in frustration. In fact, he's been frustrated his whole life. He doesn't want Mori to turn out like him, so he gives our hero some sagely advice to get out of this hut once he's strong enough and get some fresh air. Meanwhile, 0446 teaches the kids how to prepare the rabbit they caught for supper. We find out that she's actually a survivor of the Great War more than a decade ago, and this is just one of the few things she's picked up to survive during those horrible times. But right now, 0446 is more concerned for these two kids, which is why she's teaching them these skills. Later, Mori asks 0446 about 7054, and we learn that the dude's real name is James. On top of that, 0446 reveals that James wasn't just blowing smoke up Mori's butt. He really is the real deal. 0446 even tells our hero that the Bloodstorm, James's ultimate skill, is something that would surprise even someone like the Monkey King himself. But what really proves that James is the real MVP is when 0446 tells Mori more about what happened during their forced landing on Renewal Earth. According to her, the floating feeling that was supposed to cushion their fall, presumably Daiwi's natural force ability, disappeared when they were about to hit the ground. And it's here where James proved that he really is the real deal. As it turns out, James threw himself toward Mori to prevent our hero from getting crushed by the fall. James suffered massive injuries from this effort, ranging from losing his eyesight to fractures all over his body, which explains how he became the way he is right now. Mori asks 0446 if James is going to fully recover from his wounds after listening to her story. For the first time, she becomes sullen and can only tell our hero that she can only hope that James does. After their conversation, Mori tries to call Yoi to his side, but he ends up having a coughing fit and bleeding from his eyes, mouth, and nose instead. And if that's not bad enough, the insufferable nosy pink-haired Generation X hero tries to boss around our hero, telling him to thank 0446 for everything she's done for him. This ponytail-wearing brat goes on an exposition dump about how 0446 basically did everything for Mori while he was out of it, whether it was healing his wounds or helping him go pee. The annoying little girl continues running her mouth in front of Mori to basically force him to do what she wants, pretty much guilt-tripping our hero into thanking 0446 by telling him how she blames herself for the longinus mark on Mori's chest. And instead of giving this orphan a well-deserved slap in the mouth for flapping her gums and giving unwarranted advice, our hero just takes the sermon. Somewhere else, a black orb sitting on the grass starts beeping. Later that night, Mori's lying in bed when James starts coughing violently. 0446 rushes to his aid and tells the kids to make themselves useful and get some water for the man. She does her best to ease James's pain, and the two Generation X kids further prove that they're a burden to our heroes when Mori's the one who ends up fetching some water for the dude. All of a sudden, one of the kids, the less annoying boy, makes the whole situation worse when he starts coughing and throwing up all over the floor. The pink-haired girl realizes that her friend has been poisoned. Meanwhile, 0446 proves that she's really good at being a medic when she stays on top of things and tells the boy to stick his finger down his throat to induce vomiting and hopefully expel the poison from his body. Mori, always the good guy, tries to rush to the boy's aid, but James suddenly grabs him by the arm and pretty much tells our hero his dying words. As he puts it, Mori can't just sit here in this hut frustrated. But here's the real kicker. James shows us that he's an absolute unit when he pretty much implies that he's the one who poisoned the kid as revenge for what Mujin and his servants did to his wife and son. Simply put, poisoning these Generation X kids is revenge. And say what you will, but James knows how to put things in perspective. He doesn't apologize for what he has just done. Instead, he tells Mori and 0446 to carry on his revenge for him and take out all those damn kids and snuff them out. 0446 finally gets the hint and realizes that James really did poison the boy. Meanwhile, James begs Mori to continue the mission and avenge each and every person that Mujin and his disgusting regime killed in the old world. In his own words, Mori must punish these monsters no matter what. These annoying kids are complicit in spreading Mujin's reign of terror not too long ago. Things get more intense when the black orb from earlier bursts into their hut. An automated voice coming from the orb says that it has detected poison and suggests that they perform a gastric lavage with salt water on the boy and take him to the Bureau of Medical Services on Renewal Earth. The orb continues to suggest more forms of first aid treatment for the patient, but the long and short of it is that they have 1 week to take him to the Bureau of Medical Services before the poor kid succumbs to the poison. James passes away soon after that. Meanwhile, the pushy pink-haired brat then stupidly asks the poison boy if he's okay, despite having just listened to everything the orb just told everyone. 0446 and Mori erect a cairn for James the next morning. 0446 pays her final respects to her old friend and tells Mori to ignore everything he told him before he died. Later, 0446 crafts a rickshaw and boards the 2 kids and Mori on it. 0446 is back to her old self, as she stays positive and tells everyone they're going to head for the Bureau of Medical Services. Even better, she tells Mori that they might even find a cure for the wound on his heart there. The journey begins, but 0446 soon finds herself struggling to haul a grown man and a couple of kids with her bare hands. The pink-haired girl really can't stop herself from having main character energy, so she tries to get cute and quote-unquote helps 0446 push their wagon. But 0446 knows that this brat is just making her job harder, so she playfully tells the idiot that kids are supposed to eat, play, and sleep to shut her up so that they can continue with their journey. It works too, proving that 0446 really is good at her job. With the nuisance dealt with, 0446 braces herself and prepares to haul her companions aboard their wagon. Interestingly, we also learn that she used to be called the Queen of Doom among the world government executives. In any case, 0446 excitedly tells the group that they're on their way to the Bureau of Medical Services. God of High School's next chapter begins with a quick montage showing us more of 0446's heroics, as she pretty much serves as the den mom of the group, making sure that not only are they making good time on their journey towards the Bureau of Medical Services, but doing every other important thing too, like hunting game and feeding her companions. In the present, 0446 and the gang continue their journey, and she can't help but find the Black Orb to be super useful, given how it just shows her which way to go. It's almost like she has another head working for her during this whole quest. They soon run into a bear, and the Black Orb proves more of its usefulness when it kills the critter with a single electrical zap. On top of that, its artificial intelligence even suggests skinning and harvesting the beast's meat after it takes it out. 0446 sees this as a teachable moment, so she tells the two Generation X kids to take charge of preparing the bear's delicious meat. Meanwhile, Mori has become dead weight for the group, as he regularly just stares off into space and keeps on moping. But curiously, our hero notices that the Black Orb is somewhat similar to Prawl Triller, the seventh owner of the heavenly realm he once subdued. His thoughts are interrupted when the pink-haired girl starts flapping her gums yet again, this time doing an exposition dump about the specs of the Black Orb. As this brat puts it, the Black Orb is similar to an artificial intelligence that shares and gathers the collective unconsciousness of Generation X. It also saves various information, enables communication, and maintains security. It's pretty much an all-purpose tool around these parts. The pink-haired kid goes on to say that there's an entire colony of these orbs on Renewal Earth. The only reason they've only seen one for now is because they've been living in a secluded area of the planet for weeks. Mori starts to speak, but the snot-nosed child cuts him off and continues to satisfy herself with the sound of her own voice, basically putting words in Mori's mouth to tell our hero that he's curious right now, given that Renewal Earth already has advanced amenities like the Bureau of Medical Services and the Black Orbs, which we find out are called Interface. The kid brags about how Mugen and her fellow Generation X kids were building Renewal Earth's infrastructure this whole time, and of course this annoying orphan blames our hero for interfering with their work. Once more, this brainwashed pink-haired idiot sings Mugen's praises and tells Mori that he didn't even go all out during their recent duel. But our hero has no time to entertain this minuscule moron's incessant prattling, so he asks the kid one thing: is she okay with all of this? And by that, Mori means if this dummy is alright with everything Mugen has done, like the systematic massacre of Earth's population, his regime's hardcore belief in Generation X eugenics, and all the other atrocities that are too long to list here, Mori clarifies his question and pretty much tells the kid to tell him what she thinks, not what Mugen has conditioned her to believe. The kid then basically calls Mori ignorant, and if he thought that this idiot was just annoying at best up until now, what this crazy-eyed kid says next undoubtedly proves James was right. These aren't kids. These are threats that must be eliminated no matter what. See, this kid straight up tells Mori that Mugen and Generation X weren't trying to create a perfect world. They were trying to create a quote-unquote strong one. The long and short of it is that this moronic mutant's brain has been conditioned by Mugen so hard that she wholeheartedly believes that whole bullcrap about human centrism. Mori tries to reason with the kid, but you can easily tell by her eyes alone that this mutant deserves to be wiped off the face of the universe, as she pretty much tells our hero how insecure she and the rest of Mugen's followers are for being powerless in the face of literal gods. As this insane child puts it, Mori would never understand their insecurities because he was never weak to begin with. Then she goes on this whole monologue about how everything is pointless without power. Listen guys, this idiot's whole point is that Mugen's entire shtick about survival of the fittest, which is one of the stupidest arguments you could use if you're bragging about actually making humans more evolved as both a species and a society. The long and short of it is that kids like this moron and the rest of Generation X don't want to be pushed around by anyone. And, well, it goes without saying that she's too far gone. This dummy has drunk the Mugen Kool-Aid so hard that she explicitly states that she and the rest of Generation X agreed with Mugen's ideas 100%. This gives us proof beyond reasonable doubt that these aren't normal children. These are bona fide mass-murdering mutants who have no problem being party to systematic genocide. Later that night, 0446 notices Mori having a nightmare. We find out that the pink-haired brat's words got to our hero's head, as he dreams about how Mugen and Tathagata defeated him in the past. Mori wakes up in a panic, and 0446 hands him a drink to calm his nerves. They then have a heart-to-heart when Mori asks 0446 if she blames him for allowing Mugen to destroy the old world. In reply, 0446 basically tells Mori that there's no way she or the rest of humanity could blame him, considering that Mori has risked his life to save their species time and time again. 0446 then pretty much apologizes to Mori for being one of those people who didn't do anything when Mugen revised the history of the world and branded Mori as humanity's enemy. Their conversation takes a dark turn when 0446 expresses her own fears about Generation X's looming threat. As she puts it, it wasn't too long ago that humanity were just like dogs or cattle to the gods. Things aren't so different now, and humanity is reaching out to Mori to save their butts. 0446 then admits that seeing the two brainwashed Generation X kids cut up the bear's carcass earlier made her realize that this breed of mutants are truly astonishing, given that they're able to learn new skills after just seeing it once or twice, like how they did with the bear. But what would happen if these nutjobs decide to direct those flaying knives at them, at humanity? But then 0446 backpedals and gets all hopeful when she mentions how she saw these same kids praying after harvesting the bear's meat. Not only that, but 0446 questionably starts to feel guilty for having some sense in her and becoming aware that these kids are threats, not children to be coddled. In the end, 0446 loses all sense of reason and starts to wonder if she has the right to blame these young Generation X cultists for the destruction of the original Earth. She definitely can, given everything they've done. But 0446 instead relates her own experiences of being a privileged borrowed power user to Generation X to basically justify her rational belief that they're not partially to blame for what happened to the old world. She finally starts making sense again when she asks Mori if he's scared of Mugen. 0446 then goes on this whole monologue as she tells Mori how fear is nothing to be ashamed of. As she puts it, it's better to admit you're scared than to act cool and pretend to be okay, especially after all the suffering they've been through. 0446 finally cuts to the chase and tells Mori that fear is what he needs right now, before uttering some faux intellectual line about how there's nothing useless in the world. 0446 then urges Mori to go back to sleep. The next day, the group finally reaches the Bureau of Medical Services. No one asked her, but the pink-haired child takes it upon herself to act as a tour guide of the place and starts bragging about how it's much bigger and grander on the inside. In the meantime, Mori's just surprised that Mugen has been building this city all along. The group soon reaches the entrance to the Bureau of Medical Services where an automated voice acts as a gatekeeper. The pink-haired nuisance eats up more of the scenery as she rushes to one of the nearby interface and enters her code. We also finally get a name for this pink-haired girl, which is Eve. The interface checks Eve's codes and ultimately lets her in. The poison boy goes next and gains entry as well. On the other hand, Mori's hesitant to enter the building, knowing that he doesn't have a single strand of Generation X DNA in his body. But Eve tells him there's nothing to worry about, since any quote-unquote talented individual is welcome in their promised land, further proving that Mugen and Generation X created this whole world based on a form of eugenics that uses borrowed power, mutant DNA, and combat prowess as its foundations. Later, Mori undergoes a medical scan and learns that his wounded chest can't be checked. Even worse, the Bureau of Medical Services' automated prognosis system informs our hero that he's in a state of near death. It advises Mori to undergo intensive treatment in an incubator, but Mori refuses to buy into Renewal Earth's scam when it asks for his personal information in exchange. Next, the poison boy that Youngji Park still hasn't bothered to name undergoes his own medical scan, where the automated system tells him that there's an abnormal reaction in his genes caused by a failure to adapt to the environment. The AI advises the kid to undergo a thorough examination and intensive treatment. As the system puts it, the chance for his full recovery is only at 25%, with an 80% chance that his condition will recur in 5 years. The boy then asks if surgery could fix him, but the system tells him that it's impossible. And in a hilarious turn of wonderful comeuppance for these minuscule mass murderers, we find out that the kid's life expectancy is only around 10 years. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for Eve, who's in good health. 0446 gets a scan too, and she's all smiles. So everything must be alright with this optimistic medic. Later, Mori's walking around the building when he spots Eve doing some martial arts training. He notices that this homicidal brat is able to use Deiwi's Kyokushin karate moves. Meanwhile, an interface tells Eve to do some strength training. She chews up more of the scenery, apparently thinking it's cute, before going back to her training. Mori notes that this mutant bozo wasn't kidding when she said that she and her race of mutants aim to get stronger. This ultimately makes her hero realize that, yeah, James was really right. He can't just stand around and do nothing, or else all these kids are going to murder them all. His mind then drifts back to Mugen's old shtick about power being above everything else. But Mori's musings are suddenly interrupted when he starts bleeding again. He walks away and wonders if Mugen was right all along. Somewhere else, 0446 and the Poison Boy review their findings about the nanomachines. We then find out that 0446 was actually the one who invented these nanomachines when the boy asks her who she made it for. She replies by saying she had a debt to pay, and the nanomachines were just that. The boy tries to stick his nose up in 0446's business, but she deftly changes the subject and gets out of the room. She then tries to look for her old room in this building and eventually reaches a sealed door. The system won't grant her entry, so 0446 climbs the building's ducts in order to find a way in. All the while, she knows that something fishy is going on in this place. Somewhere else, Eve gets into some unsurprisingly shady crap when the building system tells her that forced entry has been detected and asks her what it should do. Eve allows the system to grant them entry, and we soon learn that the building's onboard artificial intelligence has been referring to Mori, as a door opens up in front of our hero and he enters. All the while, Mori gets a bad feeling about what's going on in this freaky building. Back to 0446, our heroine soon reaches the end of the air ducts to reach the room she's been looking for. It turns out that this room houses rows upon rows of Generation X babies still incubating in the respective pods. 0446 finds it interesting and wonders if this is the true purpose of the Bureau for Medical Services. She then speculates about two things, whether these creatures are clones, or if this room was designed to artificially cultivate new members of Generation X. All of a sudden, 0446 starts having visions of an as-yet unidentified kid putting something in his mouth. She gets sullen for some reason, but she immediately tenses up when she hears the building system declare that one of the defective bodies in the incubation chambers is going to be discarded. 0446 watches as one of the gestating kids gets popped like a grape. She finally realizes what Eve said earlier about how this bonkers promised land welcomes any quote-unquote talented individual. We've said before, and we'll say it again, this whole place was designed with eugenics in mind. That is to say, anyone who doesn't have any so-called talent gets put down like a dog. Eve suddenly walks into the room and gives 0446 an exposition dump she didn't ask for. The main gist of it is the same thing that this pink-haired girl has been flapping her gums about since the start of the story, that this brutal selection process is meant to make the human world strong. 0446 asks why they use artificial cultivation, and Eve tells her that for a supposedly advanced race of humans, Generation X's numbers are too small right now. Natural reproduction would take too long, so Mugen and his brainwashed cronies have decided to artificially grow Generation X kids to kickstart their race's population growth. Another incubating child gets discarded, while 0446 states the gaping hole in these goose-steppers' plan. As she puts it, the defective rate is too high to create what they keep calling their perfect world. Eve blames Mori and the rest of our heroes for messing with their eugenics initiative, explaining that it's their fault the defective rate went up dramatically. It used to be just 0.5%, but now these gestating kids are flatlining at an almost satisfying rate of 35%. 0446 asks Eve if she thinks executing the defective ones is harsh. Instead of copping to it or answering the question, Eve acts like a typical politician and gaslights 0446 by telling her that the old version of humanity is doing it too, using prenatal testing and genetic testing as examples. Eve then starts reminding and chastising 0446 about what she did in the past without any provocation. We learn that 0446 used to have a son who happened to be a non-borrowed power user. Eve pretty much taunts 0446 by telling her this, and her heroine tells her to shut her dumb mouth. But this mouthy piece of trash just continues to flap her lips, basically telling 0446 that it was her fault that her son died. The story then goes to a flashback where we learn that this all happened around the same time as when Mugen's death squads were making the rounds on Earth. Also, we find out that 0446 was rather cold to her kid after finding out that he was a regular human being without any borrowed power. At the time, 0446 and her son tried to escape the death squads while they were doing one of their inhumane selection processes, but her son willingly surrendered to the death squad to get tested in hopes of making his mom proud. It's here we find out that the flashback 0446 had earlier is actually about this same boy. Now, 0446's son approached the death squad and underwent the test. In the present, 0446 loses her patience with Eve and yells at her to shut her dumb hole before threatening to press a button on a device in her hand. Of course, this pink-haired idiot doesn't listen and instead continues grinding 0446's gears by continuing her story. We return to the flashback and learn that 0446's son swallowed a MacGuffin he got from the death squad to see if he's really part of Generation X. No, he's not, because the kid's head and body pops like a pimple after eating whatever it is the death squad gave him. In the present, Eve just keeps on shooting her mouth off and pretty much lumps 0446 with her. That is to say, Eve does her best to make 0446 believe that she's a piece of garbage on two legs just like her. 0446 finally loses her marbles and threatens to use her device if this filthy mutant doesn't shut the hell up. Eve continues to think she's slick and tells 0446 that she knows she's bluffing, because she knows that 0446 didn't have time to plant explosives in the building, so she can't blow it up with her device. In a satisfying turn, 0446 puts the presumptuous pink-haired idiot in her place when she reveals that the device she's holding isn't even a detonator, it's one of her nanomachines. Eve gets a fittingly stupid look on her face that's so satisfying to stare at when 0446 tells her this. Even more, our heroine has a better plan, that she'll use the nanomachine on herself to contaminate the whole building if she doesn't put a lid on her pie hole. 0446 means it too, because the interfaces in the room start to gather around her after detecting our heroine as a threat. The Black Orb's prepared to execute 0446, but Eve stops them before shooting her mouth off again to criticize her for acting all noble in spite of her checkered past. As you'd expect from a scumbag like Eve, she then pivots to pitch 0446 about Mugen's whole eugenics initiative, telling her that their genocidal sorting process is needed to make the human world strong. Unknown to these two, Mori's actually in the same room eavesdropping on them, and this pink-haired piece of garbage discusses him even further with every word that comes out of her filthy mouth. On the other hand, Mori's surprised to see that Eve's other Generation X pal, the Poison Boy, is in the same room snooping in on her and 0446's conversation too. Unlike Eve though, this boy seems like he actually has some moral fiber in him, as the look on his face suggests that he too is absolutely repelled by everything that's coming out of Eve's mouth. Meanwhile, even 0446 isn't buying Eve's crap. So this brainwashed kid goes for another angle, trying to convince 0446 to agree with their plan by appealing to their shared experience of losing people they love during the height of Mugen's pogrom. Eve tries to convince 0446 that what they and Mugen are doing is fair. Our heroine has finally had enough of this idiot's voice and lashes out at her, pretty much telling Eve she must have a few screws loose if she thinks purging an entire species is fair. The interface is trying to take out 0446, but Eve belays the order once more. 0446 then retains her composure and realizes that these Generation X kids are no different than their human counterparts. That is to say, they're just as dumb and violent. 0446 then drops her nanomachine, while the interface is prepared to arrest her. In turn, she tells Eve that she's willing to surrender under one condition, that Generation X and humans would be allowed to peacefully coexist. At the same time, we learn that Mori's been arrested by the interfaces too. Meanwhile, 0446 proposes to allow humans on Renewal Earth in exchange for her surrender. Eve refuses, so 0446 tells her to think about it though before giving her one last piece of advice, that nothing is useless in the world. Later, the Poison Boy picks up 0446's nanomachine after everybody has left the room. While this is happening, we learn that Mori and 0446 have been sent to a cell. 0446 apologizes to our hero for messing things up, but he says that it's not really her fault. In a pleasant turn of events, one of the world government executives who survived the fall toward Renewable Earth arrives in front of our hero's cell to free them. This guy, who 0446 refers to as Black Wind of Destiny, has been wounded, because it turns out that a lot of the surviving world government agents have banded together to lay siege on Renewal Earth's central area. And you gotta hand it to these guys, they're troopers to the very core. As Black Wind of Destiny puts it, they have to make their enemies suffer the same way they've made them suffer, even if it means they lose their lives in the process. This isn't about winning anymore. This is about making sure these Generation X kids regret messing with humanity. Black Wind of Destiny frees 0446 and Mori and tells them to get as far away from this place as possible. 0446 tries to get him to join them, but Black Wind of Destiny is an absolute beast. He refuses because he has some avenging to do. More alarming is when he tells our heroes that this whole place is going to explode soon. This prompts 0446 to try and force her friend to join him in escaping the building, but Black Wind of Destiny's mind is set, so he tells our heroes to make their way to the central area and regroup with the executive's main forces. Black Wind of Destiny passes on right after that. Meanwhile, we learn that the other executives have gone kamikaze on the enemy, as they really go all out in their offensive against the Bureau of Medical Services interfaces. Back to our heroes, 0446 makes the questionable decision of saving the Generation X kids before escaping. Mori tells her that they should head to the 32nd room on the left, and 0446 starts to think that the Monkey King is finally getting his powers back. Soon enough, 0446 proceeds with her poorly conceived plan of rescuing Eve and the Poison Boy. Not only that, but she even goes so far as to rescue several of the incubating mutants in the chamber room. The building soon explodes just after its system executes all the remaining inactive Generation X kids in the pods. We find out that our heroes have made it out in time. And we even get a sweet little bonus when we see Eve get another one of that super on-brand stupid look on her face while she watches the Bureau of Medical Services get wrecked, by humans no less. On the other hand, 0446 keeps on making bad decisions, as she makes the call to get these kids as far away from the Bureau of Medical Services as possible, knowing that the executives in there are elites of the elite and they'd satisfyingly snuff out these brainwashed mutants the first chance they get. Yet another questionable call occurs when 0446 says that they'll head to the central area, the same place Black Wind of Destiny just told her what the rest of the executives' main forces are going to be. As always, 0446 acts like a den mom, presumably because she has PTSD from losing her own son in the past, as they continue their journey. That night, the Poison Boy asks 0446 if her family will die if the old world disappears. 0446 isn't having any of this crap, so she tells him to shut his mouth. But this boy isn't like Eve. He actually seems like he feels bad for all the evil crap they've done in the past. Meanwhile, Mori can't help but be in awe of 0446, comparing her to a martyr who fulfills her duty in silence. The group soon reaches the central area of Renewal Earth and make their way to the unimaginatively named Central Tower. We learn that there are more of these murderous Generation X kids living in this place, as they deliberate about the recent destruction of the Bureau of Medical Services. One of the unnamed kids spots the gang and greets them. Yet another one, a brown boy with white hair and thick lips named Miguel, greets the group. Miguel also happens to be the leader of Generation X. He first approaches Eve and is relieved that she is still alive. He then greets the Poison Boy, who Young G Park finally bothers to give a name, Isaac. Meanwhile, 0446 notices that the Generation X kids have suddenly grown in size in such a short period of time. Eve then tells 0446 that their kind grows faster than regular humans with the help of Gaia. She tries to justify the destruction of Earth and their genocidal campaign yet again by telling 0446 that this is the reason they created a quote-unquote strong human world. Afterwards, Miguel approaches 0446 and Mori and thanks them for their efforts. In a questionable turn of events for these supposedly advanced race of humans, Miguel admits that there was no way they could defend the Bureau of Medical Services, since they were protecting the central area while the executives were wrecking shop back there. Nearby, several more of these kids approach Mori and try to threaten our guy by asking him if he's the one who's been beefing with Mujin. These monsters then get cute with our hero and dogpile him, telling Mori to not bully Mujin again, which just shows how brainwashed these idiots are. Instead of kicking these minuscule mass murderers' teeth in though, Mori drops his guard and falls for their corny cute shtick and starts playing with the Generation X kids. Meanwhile, 0446 lets the trauma of losing her own son get the better of her again, and she begins acting like a den mom again, starting by cooking a meal for these abominations. We then get a montage of 0446 pretending to be these little terrorist mother figure, but the plot thankfully moves forward not long after when Miguel sidebars her. It's here that we learn that Miguel, the supposed leader of Generation X, actually wants to have a peace treaty with the rest of humanity. Because if you remember, Eve literally straight up refused 0446's proposal earlier when she asked for the same considerations. In any case, Miguel pitches 0446 to negotiate terms of peaceful coexistence between their kind and humanity, and asks her to act as a liaison to meet with the other executives so they could set up a meeting. 0446 accepts and soon travels to the other executives' hideout where she's greeted by one of her old friends, a guy named Pegasus. She lets the other executives know about Miguel's proposal. Even better, we find out that this contingent of hardcore world government guerrilla fighters is led by none other than Executive 1 of Team Latin. 1 doesn't buy into the proposal, and our man has a point. First he tells 0446 that humanity's basically done for, given that Mujin and his little mutant mass murderers destroyed it a few weeks ago. Curiously, 1 still accepts the proposal to negotiate. Not long after, the executives arrive at the central tower where Miguel and his council cordially welcomes them. Miguel offers 1 a handshake, and the man takes it. On the other hand, a couple of random Generation X kids just outside the meeting room tells Mori to just stay put outside while the negotiations go down. Inside the room, Miguel tells 1 how he wishes for their meeting to pave the way for coexistence between humanity and Generation X. But crap immediately hits the fan when 1 tells these mutant murderers that they're here to collapse together. 1 then springs his master plan, and the other executives lay siege to the central tower. And in one of the most satisfying scenes of this arc so far, 1 tells Miguel that he must have made a mistake thinking that they're here to negotiate peace terms. As he puts it, he and the executives don't have any intention of living on Renewal Earth, so they might as well all die together. 0446 witnesses this happen, as Miguel turns around and tells her he did his best to broker a peace between their two sides. All the while, 1 prepares to chop this kid's head off with his bare hand. Outside, the central tower is rocked by numerous explosions, while Mori springs into action to see that 1's forces have begun their offensive. Like 0446, Mori makes the questionable decision of protecting the central tower from the executives, which if you recall are originally his allies in this ongoing war against Mujin and his army of goose-stepping mutants. On the bright side, we find out that Mori is able to wield Yoi again. One of the executives is absolutely scandalized that Mori has seemingly switched sides, but we learn that our hero is doing all this because he's gotten soft after all the tragedies he's experienced in the past, like losing his family and friends. The executives lose their patience and try to start some smoke with the Monkey King, but 0446 jumps in to scold her fellow operatives. Unfortunately, we discover that she's fully bought into the idea that these Generation X terrorists are kids, so she berates her fellow executives for attacking them. 1 unnamed executive calls her out for her nonsense and stresses the fact that this is no time for her den mom crap. They have to get revenge for what Mujin's forces, these Generation X monsters included, have done to the people of Earth. But 0446 is not having any of it. She tells the executives to take out their anger on Mujin as if these mutants' hands were clean. Once more, she pretty much says that they're just innocent kids, forgetting about the fact that they're accomplices to all of Mujin's atrocities. On a more reasonable note, 0446 also defends Mori from them, telling her executive pals that they have no right to attack our hero. Because for one, Mori's an absolute legend who's risked life and limb time and time again to rescue their sorry butts. 1 steps in and tries to make 0446 see how stupid her pacifist views are regarding this whole war. 1 couldn't have said it any better. This is war. People are going to kill and get killed, so get with the program. Mori's nose suddenly starts bleeding, while 1 figures he's wasted enough time talking to 0446 and prepares to mobilize his men to continue their offensive. He drops even more truth bombs on our naive, PTSD-stricken heroine when he tells her that if you're going to lose this war, you make sure you leave your enemy with the most wounds possible. An absolute legend. One and his forces leave to get on with their job, while Mori and 0446 are left there to question morality and justice all they want. Later, we find out that One and his forces' attack was a resounding success, as we learn that they've decimated Generation X's forces. The remaining kids on active duty in 0446 scamper to do triage and save whoever they can in the aftermath of the attack. We then find out that Miguel got grievously wounded in the chaos that ensued at the Central Tower. Even better, we find out that the executives aren't just attacking their enemies like a bunch of wild animals. They actually had a plan. They started by destroying the Bureau of Medical Services in order to cut off the rest of the enemy from medical treatment and supplies, which has nicely rendered the Generation X operatives at the Central Tower even more vulnerable. Later, the remaining kids in Miguel's council deliberate on what they should do next, especially considering that they lack the necessary resources and equipment to treat their fellow mutant murderers. One random brat proposes they choose a new leader instead, considering that Miguel's out of commission right now. The whole meeting devolves into a screaming match between the kids, while Isaac just remains quiet. He eventually hears one of them say that they could save 4 of their fellow Generation X kids if they sacrifice one among their ranks. Isaac doesn't so much as volunteer as his other Generation X friends subtly pressure him into doing it when they give him a certain look. One of them even explicitly tells Isaac that he should give up his life to save 4 of their kind, since he has the shortest lifespan among them. Well, Isaac agrees to it anyway, which doesn't sit well with 0446. He says goodbye to her, while Eve piles on and says Isaac made his own decision. Eve continues to act like the absolute worst, as she tries to justify Isaac's sacrifice, proving that these mutants aren't just mass murderers, much less kids. They're bona fide goose-stepping utilitarian collectivists. All the other Generation X kids say goodbye to Isaac and applaud him for his decision to off himself for the good of their filthy group. And to his credit, he really doesn't mind sacrificing himself for these scumbags. But then, 0446's PTSD about her long-dead son kicks in and prompts her to stop Isaac from offing himself. Isaac pleads with her to let him go, telling her that he agreed to do it anyway. But in her own words, 0446 tells Isaac that she's going to whip his butt if he says another nonsense. 0446 then goes on this whole tirade about the value of life, telling Isaac that he's not just a number and how he's good enough as he is. It's super effective too, because this makes the boy realize that, no, he really doesn't want to sacrifice himself for the sake of his scummy brethren. And with that, 0446 tells Mori that they should get out of the Central Tower and let the executives and the other Generation X kids tear each other apart. As she puts it, this whole thing has turned into a mess. On one hand, the executives are apparently killing children like it's nothing. On the other hand, these same children are pieces of trash who treat people's lives as mere numbers. They're all no different from Mugen, if 0446 is to be believed. 0446 and Mori soon come across more of the Generation X kids, who then creepily thank her for stopping them from allowing Isaac to sacrifice himself. Even weirder is when they point our heroes to the exit and decide to join their escape. Everything's all good. That is until Eve arrives and decides to force her way into the group, as they make their way out of the tower. But 0446 is too soft to do the right thing and put one between this idiot's eyes, so she just begrudgingly accepts Eve into the group and they all make their way out of the Central Tower. Somewhere else, we finally get our first glimpse at Mugen after they crash-landed on Renewal Earth. The demigod awakes from a containment chamber and senses our hero's movements somewhere in this new world. He rises in spite of the system's advice to let himself undergo intensive treatment, as he says that bugs have crawled into his territory, prompting him to deal with these quote-unquote scums. Somewhere else, the Longinus mark on Mori's chest starts to throb when he senses Mugen is reawakened. So he tells 0446 that they should get away from the central area as far away as possible. Back in the Central Tower, the executives continue their offensive, and they're even winning against these filthy Generation X operatives. One random kid states the obvious and says that the executives are really trying to die together. Unfortunately, Mugen arrives right in the middle of the battlefield before our heroic executives could finish the job. He mentions Mori's name and tells him to not lay a finger on his world. And, well, things just go bad for the executives right then and there, as Mugen massacres each and every one of them with a wave of his hand. He even throws some shade and gets super racist with them in the process, referring to these borrowed power users as worms while killing them with impunity. On the bright side, the stress from using one of his techniques makes Mugen's chest bleed out, and we find out that this is a wound that Mori gave him back when our hero caved in his chest while they were free-falling towards Renewal Earth a few weeks ago. All the while, 0446 rushes to pull their card while carrying all the mutant dead weight they took with them. Mori helps out and pushes it from behind, as they try their best to gain some distance from the epicenter of the battlefield. Back in the Central Tower, Executive 1 holds one of Mugen's Generation X lackeys hostage to buy him and the executives some time. One soon receives word from his men that they've planted all the explosives needed to blow up the building. They're just awaiting his order to set them off. From there, one talks some fantastic trash at Mugen, telling him that all it would take for them to destroy everything he's built in this place is if he moves a single muscle. Mujin replies by blasting one with a beam of energy that blows his arm off before telling him that he's already hurt the things that are dear to him. His Generation X lackey then runs to Mujin and gives the villain a hug. Mujin checks on his soldier, who's currently bleeding, and this boy is so brainwashed that he says he's okay. On the other hand, Executive 1 dies in the most embarrassing way possible when all he does during his final moments is pretty much backpedal on his recent opinions about Mujin being a trashy, genocidal maniac and starts praising the guy. Mujin's not buying it, and he's honestly tired of Executive 1's fanboy attitude, so he finishes the guy off by blowing half of his entire body to oblivion before telling him to shut up. Mujin checks on his lackey again, and the kid gets a hint that he might have bet on the wrong horse when he tells Mujin that one actually pulled back just as he was about to deliver the killing blow. But Mujin's not having any insubordination in his ranks, so he just tells his lackey that it's because humans are weak. Mujin then sits on his throne and starts going to town on all the remaining world government executives laying siege to the central area. He starts by summoning the mandala and using it to systematically execute any and all executives he could find. But there are still a lot more of these world government troopers, and they already have Mandala's abilities checked, so they decide to hide in one of the buildings in the central area to avoid getting pricked to death. It doesn't work because Mujin just ups the ante and tells the mandala to use an ability called Violent Thread to penetrate the building walls. More executives get killed, but one heroic world government agent manages to reach their detonator just before taking his last breath. He activates the explosives and destroys Mujin's upscale neighborhood. In turn, Mujin gets even more pissed off, so he summons the fourth symbol, Badro, and uses it to nuke every remaining world government executive in the city. Still, a few of these troopers are able to escape to the outskirts of the central area, but they're too tuckered out and wounded to fight. At the same time, we learn that 0446, Mori, and their mutant cargo have reached the same place and managed to escape Mujin's devastating salvo. All the other executives don't take kindly to seeing 0446 bring these mass-murdering kids to them, of course. She knows this, so she tells their Generation X cargo to keep their heads down. It doesn't work, and the executives easily spot the enemy and prepare to eliminate them. Mori tells them to stop, and it just enrages the executives even more, now that they know the Monkey King has taken the enemy's side. Things get worse when we soon learn that these survivors have gone nuts from the trauma of getting dunked on by Mujin just now. A bunch of dudes even desperately grab Mori and make him promise to avenge them and achieve victory against the enemy. Mori ignores them, and the mob just gets crazier after that. Another random crazed executive hurls a rock right at our hero's head. And it's at this point that more crap hits the fan, as these dudes show that they've really gone off the deep end when they declare that Mujin is actually a real prophet and that the Monkey King deceived them. These mentally unhinged executives then literally get on their knees and start worshipping Mujin to ask him for forgiveness, even going so far as to declare him as an honest-to-goodness god. 0446 sees this and can only laugh at the crap show that this whole war has done to her allies. Meanwhile, Mori recalls his conversation with Eve and realizes that the way the executives feel right now must have been what Mujin felt in the past, back when he was still flapping his gums about human centrism and all that garbage. But then, a stroke of good luck arrives in front of our heroes when Mori and 0446 suddenly hear a radio transmission coming from Earth. The signal's weak and they can't make out exactly what the guy on the other end is saying. Even better, Mori hears Ahan's voice communicating with them from the Ark. Isaac goes on a quick exposition dump that communication is now possible between Earth and Renewal Earth because most of the Central Area's facilities have been destroyed. He goes on to tell the group that they can clear the radio signals if they do something about the Central Control Tower. The problem is that Renewal Earth's interfaces have a so-called intrusion prevention system, which means people from Earth can't go to Renewal Earth to either settle here or rescue our marooned heroes. Plus, Isaac tells them that Renewal Earth has a quote-unquote planet-destructive weapon, which is exactly as it sounds. It's a weapon that can destroy a planet. And if it's activated and pointed at Earth, the old world will surely get completely wrecked. 0446 says that they'll take time to think about the next step to take. What matters is that they now know that there are still survivors on Earth. Before she can finish her sentence though, Badros appears and starts blasting. Mujin goes on another genocidal salvo, as he uses both Badros and the mandala to summarily execute the remaining world government executives. Chaos ensues, and Mori almost even gets flatlined when the mandala attempts to drive itself into his face. But 0446 jumps in to rescue our hero just in the nick of time. But things get even worse because Mujin has now sensed Mori's presence, so he points Badros towards our hero to obliterate him. The random Generation X kid beside Mujin now fully realizes that his boss is evil, so it forgets its place and tries to stop Mujin. Meanwhile, Mori tells everyone to run just as Badros lets out a beam of devastating energy, which eliminates even more of the remaining executives. 0446 pulls her card again to gain some distance from Mujin's attack, while Isaac makes himself useful and tells her that the building on the left 2 blocks away is safe. 0446 tells everyone to make their way to the building, but they are forced to stop in their tracks when the road they're on suddenly collapses. Still, 0446 isn't quitting, so she tells their cargo that they're going to go over to the other side to reach safety. From there, 0446 and Mori double time it to rescue all the dead weight they brought with them. On the bright side, 0446 doesn't just focus on saving these defected Generation X kids. She does her best to rescue any executive that she crosses paths with. 0446 curses Mugen and vows that there's no way he could break her will. Not only that, but our heroine promises that she's going to save everyone and spit in Mugen's face afterwards. Mori and 0446 rush to get to the other end of the road. Unsurprisingly, these Generation X kids show that they're an absolute burden when one of them falls behind after nearly falling from the gap that formed in the broken highway. The kid is about to get crushed by a huge chunk of concrete just as he's about to climb to the road again. Mori tries to jump into action but realizes he's too late. Things become even more nuts when a random executive swoops in and rescues this wimpy kid from turning into a pancake. The boy becomes even more of a burden when it starts crying instead of hoofing it towards Mori and 0446, forcing even more executives to jump in and use whatever energy they have left to hold up the piece of concrete so that this dead weight doesn't get crushed to death. Let's just say that all these other executives have now bought into 0446's naive concept of saving everyone. So they've pretty much given up on fulfilling their mission to eliminate the enemy and have instead started saving Mugen's former lackeys. The group makes a run towards the safe zone and soon reach the other end of the road. The problem is, a collapsed building is blocking their path. So Mori gets to work and attempts to lift it out of the way. He struggles at first but eventually succeeds in lifting the building overhead. The other executives show us that they're consummate professionals when they help Mori by grabbing several pillars to prop up the building and make a path for the rest of the group. They continue making their way to the safe zone soon enough, but Mori feels his body giving out on him when he starts throwing up blood after exerting too much force. This distracts him from a huge rock that's about to drop on his head, but 0446 rescues him again. With everyone in the clear, 0446 tells the group to rush to the other end of the road and toward the safe zone. And you gotta give our girl some props, because unlike Mugen, 0446 is actually able to keep her word and save everyone in the group when they reach the building, prompting the survivors to celebrate this victory, regardless if it's a small one. Meanwhile, Mugen's mutant lackey continues to forget his place and straight up tells his boss that he went too far, leading to the destruction of the city he worked so hard to build. As for 0446, well, she really wasn't able to save everyone, because we soon find out that she herself has been fatally wounded during their escape, something that Mori is the first to notice. God of High School's next chapter starts with a quick flashback showing us a montage of the original God of High School tournament from all the way back in the first season of the series. In the present, Mori realizes that 0446 sustained her fatal wound when she rescued him earlier from Mandala's strike. Everyone in the room notices that 0446 is about to take her last breath, so they approach her. She calls for Isaac and starts going on a long-winded Hallmark-style inspirational speech. First, 0446 tells Isaac about how she made her son feel unloved because the boy was not a borrowed power user. The long and short of it is that it took her son's death to make 0446 realize how much she loved her kid back then. She then tells Isaac the same motto she's been telling everyone since we first met her, that nothing is useless in the world. 0446 then pretty much tells Isaac to value his life because someone would mourn him if he died. Her whole heartfelt monologue continues, as she tells the boy to never judge himself or anyone based on their competence and usefulness alone. She even uses humanity as an example, given that these filthy genetic anomalies always love looking down on people. As 0446 puts it, even insignificant people can pull off significant things when they come together, and her point is to make people like Eve stop hating humans so much. Afterwards, Mori apologizes to 0446 for not being strong enough to save her life, but she says that it's her that should be apologizing to our hero right now. 0446 then turns to Mori and gives him one final pep talk, telling him that it's okay to be afraid. As a matter of fact, fear is the emotion that Mori needs the most right now. Circling back to her original point, nothing is useless, even fear. As 0446 puts it, everything is needed. She then uses her fellow executives as another example, telling Mori that these guys who started blaming him for their misfortune are also the same people who rescued their mutant cargo. And as she puts it, they're all insignificant humans, but sometimes they're significant. 0446 then goes on to tell Mori that she believes these past few days have been the bravest and wisest moments of her life. She explicitly tells her hero that although she seems useless, she sometimes does useful things too. The same goes for Mori, who 0446 thinks isn't just made up of the brave, great, and damn cool Mori Jin, but also includes the pathetic, lousy, and scared Mori Jin. It's all a part of a whole is what she's saying. 0446 then tells our hero to accept himself for the way he is, and that includes all the parts he thinks are useless. Then he'd be free to do whatever he wants. Mori thanks 0446, but she refuses to accept his gratitude, thinking she doesn't deserve it. And it's here we get the big reveal about 0446's true identity, as Mori finally recognizes her to be none other than Nurse Heel, the same nurse from the God of High School tournament all the way back at the start of the series. 0446 realizes that her cover has been blown and profusely apologizes to Mori for taking Mujin's side after the end of the Great War. Mori takes off her shades so that they could see each other eye to eye, and we get another flashback showing that Hio purposely hid her identity from our hero because she was too embarrassed for betraying him in the past. Hio seemingly dies, and we get yet another flashback detailing what happened to her in the 17 years that transpired between the end of Ragnarok and now. It turns out that Hio is a non-borrowed power user, but Mujin still hired her to become part of his team due to her extensive knowledge in nanomachines. She accepted the offer, while her other friend from the tournament, Nurse B, sided with our heroes at the time. Hio went on to live an exceedingly ordinary life after that. She married and had a kid. The kid turned out to be a non-borrowed power user. You guys already know the rest. But Hio's point is that she thinks her son's death and the guilt she feels about it is all punishment for betraying Mori at the end of the Great War. In the present, though, Hio is finally able to make peace with her mistakes and is just relieved that she gets to apologize to Mori like this. Hio finally dies for real as everyone rushes to her side. Later, we learn that Mori has built a cairn for Hio's body in the middle of a forest somewhere on Renewal Earth. He and Isaac pay their final respects to their fallen savior, and Isaac hands our hero the same nanomachine that Hio made. We then get another big reveal, that Hio created this same nanomachine to specifically help Mori as a way of repaying her debt for betraying him more than a decade ago. Mori takes the nanomachine syringe and juices himself up to help with his wounds. But Isaac lets our hero know that this is a temporary fix because the Longinus mark on his heart is closer to a curse than an actual physical injury. But Mori says it's okay as long as he can move for a while. Even better, Isaac further proves his usefulness to our heroes when he tells Mori that he was able to remove the noise from the message they got earlier from Earth. It turns out that the person on the other line was telling them that the energy stones that Ilpio and the world government have collected are now almost fully charged, and they're just awaiting orders to know where they should drop the payload. We also get a quick montage showing that everyone on Earth, from borrowed power users like Poomwang to regular random people, banding together and pulling their weight to survive and defeat the enemy. The second part of the message then plays. It's the one from Ahan. In it, she pretty much tells Mori and all her surviving heroes trapped on Renewal Earth to sit tight and wait for backup to arrive. She then addresses Mori directly and basically tells her adopted brother that they're not going to exclusively rely on him to save their butts anymore. As she puts it, they're part of the Force too, so they're not going to let him fight alone. They're going to help him win his battle against Mujin. The message ends, and Isaac acts like a wet blanket, telling Mori that if Ahan and the Ark arrive on Renewal Earth, the planet-destructive weapon's just going to shoot down the old world and everyone there is going to die. Eve suddenly appears and worms her way into the conversation to inform Mori that he can stop the planet-destructive weapon if they hack into the Central Control Tower's main server. Isaac knows this is kind of a stupid plan, given that Mujin is in the Central Control Tower. But Mori's mind is made up, so he tells him that he's going anyway. Isaac asks if he's scared that he might die if our hero does this, and it seems Hio's lessons have rubbed off on him. Mori says he is scared, but he's even more terrified of running away like he's been doing ever since the start of the series. In a nutshell, Mori has finally accepted his whole self as per Hio's dying request, telling Isaac that all his previous identities, like Mori Jin and Mori Dan, are all part of him. As our hero puts it, he's going to accept everything about himself and then go punch Mujin and Tathagata in the face. And for a purported genius, Isaac doesn't really get what Mori's saying, so our hero just tells the boy that it's grown-up stuff and they walk away from Hio's grave. Soon after, several of the surviving executives, each one with a cool name like Iron Punch, Swordsman of the Abyss, Pillar of the Earth, and Mortal of the Universe, decide to join Mori on this quest to the Central Tower. Mori accepts their help, while Eve gets another stupid look on her face when she realizes that something has changed about the Monkey King. The insufferable brat wonders if it's his power or energy, but Mori answers the question himself when he has a monologue about everything repeating itself. See, Mori's pretty much been trapped in samsara, whether it was during his time as the Monkey King thousands of years ago or today's war against Mujin. Mori finally understands his old master's final trial to break the chain of samsara, and it pretty much boils down to Mori now being able to accept other people's help instead of carrying the burden alone. Our hero vows to break free of this samsara with the help of his allies. Somewhere else, Mujin's Generation X lackey asks him why he's taking his power back. He tells the kid that Mori's coming to stand before him again, and this time he'll show up as a difficult enemy. In any case, Mujin welcomes the challenge to put hands on his arch-enemy once again. Not long after, we learn that Mori and his group have finally reached the Central Control Tower. God of High School's main plot takes a backseat, however, as the story instead shifts its focus to everything that has happened on Earth since Mugen tried to destroy it a few weeks ago. It turns out that the only reason the old world didn't get completely pulverized was because Uma came up clutch and used her own abilities to stave off the brunt of Mugen's attack. So instead of becoming space dust, Earth has just turned into a post-apocalyptic wasteland. We then get this side story about a teenage girl who likes to film people with her phone as a way to record what's left of humanity that's too unnecessarily long for its own good. It doesn't move the plot in any way nor provide any information that we don't already know. Look, all you should be aware of here is that humanity is having a rough go at it, but they continue to do their respective jobs to help in the war effort. As for the girl, well, her whole point is that humanity doesn't deserve to die. We also see her try and contact honest-to-goodness aliens at some point. Hey, the post-apocalypse can make you do crazy things. In any case, we finally get some plot development after Youngji Park's bold-faced attempt at filling the page count of this chapter when the story shifts its attention to the Ark. We learn that the surviving crew members of this flagship have decided to collect the dead bodies of their comrades floating in space to give them a proper send-off in the aftermath of the climactic battle that happened between Mugen and Mori a few weeks ago. Ahan leads this charge, using her borrowed power to extract the corpses of their allies in the vacuum of space. On top of that, we learn that the people on the Ark really have no idea if Mori's still alive. Meanwhile, Beck attempts to do some repairs on the ship but soon learns that the Ark's entire engine block is broken. Even worse, the ship's energy reserves are now at 20%, meaning that they're all living on borrowed time. Beck knows that he can fix the ship's engine, but that would be pointless, since the Ark pretty much doesn't have any fuel left. Plus, they can't contact Uma for help. Knowing all this, Beck starts to think that this is the end of the line for them and wonders what Ilpio would do in a situation like this. With their supplies running out and the Ark basically stranded in space, Beck knows that it's hopeless. But then, his energy reader starts beeping. He follows the signal to its source until he reaches Mugen's deformed kid. Specifically, Beck learns that the energy signature is coming from the same pendant that Mugen gave his baby before abandoning it. It turns out that this pendant isn't just a fancy keepsake. It's an honest-to-goodness MacGuffin that can help Beck and the Ark's crew survive this ordeal. See, Beck recalls that Mugen originally used this pendant to store energy inside it for 17 years, the same energy he used to murder Taijin. This makes our guy realize that the pendant probably absorbed all the energy stored in the Holy Grail after it broke. And with that, Beck finds the Ark's saving grace. At that same moment, Dean runs into the room to tell him to come to the Ark's bridge where they received the same message that Mori and Hio got on Renewal Earth. The one where the people of Earth were telling anyone who can hear them that the energy stones are nearly fully charged. All of this new information allows Beck to figure out that nearly all the pieces they need to win the war are in place, such as the energy stones on Earth, Generation X's resonance, and the pendant that Mugen left with his baby, who's revealed to be a girl. We also find out that it was at this point when Ahan sent out his message to the survivors marooned on Renewal Earth after Beck urged her to. As Beck puts it, they're going to need Mori as the final piece of this grand puzzle, so it's best that Ahan would be the one to send out the communique. On top of that, we learn that Beck ordered their allies on Earth to transfer the energy stones gathered juice to the Ark. Now we all know how Ahan's message went down already, about how she told the surviving world government executives trapped on Renewal Earth to just hang in there and wait for backup to arrive, and how she promised Mori that they'll help him win his fight against Mugen. More relevant is what happens after Ahan sends out her call, as Beck gives them a couple of options for their next move. 1, they could head straight for Renewal Earth to provide their allies some much-needed backup and destroy their enemy head-on. Or 2, they could head back to the old world, round up every surviving human on the Ark, and head to Renewal Earth to settle there. Beck tells the group that option 1 is a risk, considering that they're all definitely going to die if they don't link up with Mori. Dean and Ahan choose option 1, firmly believing that Mori's still alive. Bongram, on the other hand, prefers option 2 since it's less of a risk. Beck then weighs his choices, noting that option 2 is the more rational one. But he chooses to follow his gut for the first time of his life instead, and choose option 1. With a 3-1 vote, option 1 wins, and our heroes prepare to steer the Ark toward Renewal Earth. As he puts it, a miracle might happen and they could end up winning the whole thing. Dean and Bongram use their resonance to transfer the energy from Earth to the Ark, and the ship proceeds to take off. Back on Renewal Earth, the litter of Generation X kids that Heel took and volunteered to join Mori and the executive's mission to storm the central control tower. We also find out that not only are these brats brainwashed idiots, they're also a bunch of sycophantic wind vanes. This is no less obvious when one of them explicitly states that they agree with Mugen's idea, from the creation of Renewal Earth to the pogroms that he propagated under his rule. But they also agree with our heroes. In any case, they tell our heroes that they should hide behind them when the central control tower's interface is attacked. Shortly after, our heroes mobilize and prepare to storm the tower. We even get introduced to a couple of other executives named Rock of Fate and Storm of Light, along with the reintroduction of Executive Alphabet D. Mori tells Isaac to take control of the central control tower system while he goes and punches Mujin in the face, and with that, they begin their mission. The group's path is instantly blocked by the interfaces the moment they step into the control tower, so one of the executives comes up clutch and uses a technique called Hermes Sandals to give him super speed and divert the interface's attention. Executive D also does his part, using his borrowed power to guide his allies, all the while sensing that Mujin seemingly has no limit to his power. Yet another executive uses his borrowed power, Sisyphus, to block the interfaces and make a path for his friends. Meanwhile, all of Generation X's talk about letting the executives hide behind them when the interfaces attack turns out to be hogwash when we learn here that they're not even on the front lines. They're just in the back shouting updates at the rest of our heroes. On the bright side, we learn that the executives have successfully lured the interfaces to give Mori an open path to Mujin, and now they move on to the next step of their plan, buying Mori enough time to reach their main enemy. It becomes a tense, time-sensitive battle between the executives and the interfaces, but they eventually succeed in their respective submissions, which all ultimately allow Mori to get closer to their target. Back on the Ark, the ship's crew members receive a message from Mori telling them that he hasn't given up either. On top of that, he tells everyone on board the Ark that he'll take care of business on Renewal Earth to allow their ship to safely send in additional forces. Everyone from Ahan to Dean to Beck hear all this and couldn't be happier that their ace player Mori is still alive. More importantly, Beck knows that this isn't just a miracle, it's the important final piece of the puzzle that they've been waiting for to finally put down Mujin. Meanwhile, on Renewal Earth, the executives also get hyped and Beck declares that it's time to commence their operation to kill God. At the same time, the Ark makes a beeline toward Renewal Earth. A swarm of interfaces try to attack the ship, but they counter with an energy beam of their own. Somewhere inside the control tower, Mujin tells the system to open the hatch. As he prepares to use his planet-destructive weapon on Earth, he connects himself to Gaia, which allows him to regenerate from his wounds and get an energy injection all at the same time through a bunch of tubes that penetrate Mujin's body. But the main point of these tubes is to control the planet-destructive weapon, whose name is revealed to be Divine Punishment. Mujin commands the system to point Divine Punishment right at Earth so that he could erase its existence for good. He activates the weapon a second later, and energy starts to form around it. Meanwhile, Mori continues to make his way towards Mujin and is even accompanied by Isaac. He's forced to stop in his tracks when an army of Mujin's summoned undead soldiers attack them. Our hero knows that he could have easily taken out each and every one of these creatures if he was at full strength, especially considering he just got his powers back a few weeks ago before Yongji Park decided to do another one of these soft reboots for Mori. Still, our hero makes do with what he's got and uses pure martial arts alone to defeat the army of undead warriors. Meanwhile, Eve watches from afar and does her own commentary on the battle. She basically parrots Daily's opinion of Mori, that our main man is an absolute beast who has reached the highest level of combat expertise in spite of being a quote-unquote noob. Eve continues to blow smoke out of her butt, pretty much becoming a Mori fangirl when she says that our hero is now a completely new god who has reached the extreme level of martial art. This turncoat even commentates on Mori's effective combat range, which is technically infinite whenever Yoi is in his hands due to the fact that his magic staff can extend its range indefinitely. But she's too stupid to accept it as fact even though all the evidence points to the contrary. Meanwhile, Mori finishes up flatlining Mujin's undead monsters. But at the same time, Mujin has just given the order to activate his planet-killing weapon. Divine Punishment lets out a gigantic laser beam pointed directly at Earth, and all Mori can do is watch his home planet get turned into space dust. However, the Ark gets in the way of Divine Punishment's beam and uses nearly all of its stored energy to counter it and cleave the laser in half, effectively diverting its trajectory and missing its target. Earth is able to avoid a direct hit, but 90% of the Ark's energy has been spent. Regardless, Beck gives the command to use all the ship's remaining juice to steer the Ark toward Renewal Earth. Both Mori and the people aboard the Ark get a morale boost when they sense each other, as the ship continues to make a beeline for Mujin's planet. In the meantime, Mori continues to flatline even more of Mujin's undead warriors, while we get another glimpse of the inconsequential girl who likes to film stuff on Earth. Right now, the girl tells herself the same thing she's been telling everyone when we first met her, that she's here to document the scene that might be the last of humanity. Back on the Ark, Beck's crew members repeat that 90% of their ship's energy has been lost after countering Mujin's first blast from his planet-destructive weapon. But as they've already mentioned earlier, the good news is Earth avoided a direct hit. Beck then makes the order to divert all of the ship's remaining energy to enter Mujin's promised land. The Ark speeds down towards the planet. Mujin senses this and activates a shield to cover all of Renewal Earth and prevent our heroes from penetrating it. Back on the ship, one of Beck's crew members reports that they can't enter Renewal Earth due to Mujin's shield. The same dude follows up with additional breaking news, that an immense amount of energy is detected from the Promised Land, presumed to be none other than Mujin's planet-destructive weapon. The planet-killing cannon charges up for another blast, while Beck tells his crew to get ready for a counterfire. But one of them reminds them that they've already lost 90% of their juice, so it would be impossible to do that. Yet another crew member states the obvious and tells everyone that the Earth will get a direct hit from Mujin's next salvo. The planet-destructive weapon shoots out a beam of energy, which literally curves from its side to make its way towards Earth. Back on Renewal Earth, we finally get up to speed with Mira and Daewee. It turns out that they survived the crash landing just like a few of the other executives. The problem is, there are some world government agents who have gone nuts and are now blaming Daewee for failing to protect them. Still, Mira and Daewee continue to aimlessly walk around Renewal Earth. But the hits just keep on coming, as we learn that Mira's eyesight is almost completely gone. She asks her husband if he's okay. Daewee says yes, but the truth is that his condition is rapidly deteriorating. That's because his recent scuffle against Mujin left him with severe brain damage. Oh, and he's losing his eyesight too. Daewee and Mira soon take a breather and sit somewhere in Renewal Earth's forest. Mira asks him if they lost the war, to which Daewee says yes. She says she's scared, and Daewee shares the same sentiment. Mira then asks her partner if Mori's still alive. Daewee's confident that their best friend is still out there, given that they survived too. Mira takes this moment to apologize to Daewee. See, she blames herself for a lot of the crap that's happened to Daewee, like how Xiao Chen died and how she thinks she always makes him miserable. In reply, Daewee tells his wife that none of it is her fault. It's a whole pity party where Mira blames herself, then Daewee does the same. Thankfully, this doesn't go on for long, and Mira soon tells Daewee that she saw his old best friend, Sung Tai, die in peace. She wonders if they could have the same kind of death, but Daewee brushes off this morbid question and instead tells her to just think about how they'll all celebrate with Mori once this whole bonkers mess is done. Mira agrees, and the couple continue their journey. They lose all the remaining energy after some time though, and Mira passes out in the middle of the forest. Daewee tries to use his sage powers to heal Mira's eyesight, but she stops him from doing it. Mira knows that Daewee might die if he uses any more of his powers, so she berates her husband for not caring about himself. Mira loses her composure, but to her credit, our girl cuts to the chase and just tells Daewee that they should die together if he plans on offing himself anyway. So she threatens to stab herself in the throat with her blade, telling Daewee that they could just die together if she's a burden to him. Daewee stops her and apologizes. Mira lashes out and tells Daewee to take better care of himself. This goes on for a few pages until Mira gets her wits together and hugs her husband. She then apologizes profusely, but Daewee says it's all good and they should just focus on surviving right now. Unknown to them, what looks like a child with blue hair watches them from behind the bushes. Daewee then waxes nostalgic about how Sung Tai used to be his only best friend until he met Mori and Mira. The long and short of it is that Daewee believes he wouldn't have made it this far if not for them. He then gathers his resolve and tells Mira that they should live. In his own words, whether they sink or swim, they can watch the end together. Mira agrees, and the couple passes out soon after that. Daewee wakes up to find out that the same kid who had been stalking them has gotten all weird and started licking him in the face. The kid rushes back behind a tree the moment Daewee and Mira wake up. Even better, they learn that the kid has left them a plate of salad. Daewee figures out that the kid, who turns out to be a girl, wants them to eat the salad. They do so and the kid is happy about it. She soon gives them more food and licks their faces some more, which magically heals Daewee and Mira's battle wounds. The kid leaves, and we get the big reveal that this was none other than Heite, because she's apparently a young humanoid girl now. Daewee asks Heite if they're still friends before she leaves. She says they are and wishes them happiness before transforming into her original form and getting out of there. Even more questionable is when Daewee tells Mira that Heite has left for good after curing them. No explanation is given for this, only that she probably paid a great price to cure Daewee and Mira, considering that their condition had deteriorated beyond recovery before Heite did her magic on them. With Mira and Daewee's health now conveniently restored, he invites his wife to go punch Mujin in the face. Afterwards, we get a recycled sequence showing the moment Mujin's about to fire his planet-killing weapon at Earth. Beck states the obvious and knows that the old world and everyone in it is going to perish with a direct hit from the blast. But in another convenient turn of events, Daewee and Mira band together and perform a joint countermove to prevent the Earth from getting hit by the laser. Daewee starts off by using his natural force and strong force technique to get in the way of the incoming blast. He even declares that he and Mira aren't going to back off until they punch Mujin good. Daewee then uses his recently acquired Book of an Old Deer and reads a couple of pages of it to direct his gravity and inertia abilities while Mira blurts out a trio of coordinates to direct her time on Earth. This culminates in a joint technique called Tam and Natural Force, which literally raises a wooden sea vessel in the middle of the city called the Supergiant Ark. Daewee and Mira then make more of these supergiant arcs, while the random girl from earlier continues filming everything that's happening. All she does is be surprised by the sight of 100 giant wooden ships floating above the skies of New Korea. The story gets back on track as we learn that Mira and Dewi are planning on conducting an exodus to save what remains of humanity on Earth. Mujin can sense Mira and Dewi's presence from his seat and welcomes the challenge brought by our heroes. Meanwhile, Isaac makes himself useful and attempts to take control of the central system, with his first priority to stop the planet's destructive weapon. He tells his fellow kids to back him up and they obey. With that, Isaac starts to hack into Renewal Earth's main server. Somewhere else, Mori senses that Mira and Dewi are back in action, and vice versa. They're glad that each of them is alive and declare that they're going to fight and win. Back on the Ark, a crew member tells Beck that they can't penetrate the shield, so Beck tells them to focus all the remaining energy on one point. They have to get through the barrier at any cost. All the while, Ahan tells Beck that they should at least send Mori his power. Back on Renewal Earth, Mira and Dewi tell Mori that they'll take care of Earth so that he can deal with Mujin. Mori rushes towards his archenemy and soon comes face to face with him. Mori tells Mujin that he came here to punch him in the face, even referring to him by his original name, Mubong. In reply, he tells Mori to not call him by his government name and refer to him as Mujin. And in a totally ill-paced turn of events, the next chapter of God of High School starts with a flashback from a few moments ago, just before Mori reached Mujin. There's really nothing much here that contributes to moving the plot forward, except for the fact where we learn that our hero is actually accompanied by one of the Generation X kids, Eve, while on his way to Mujin. Somewhere else, Isaac and his other Generation X brethren continue hacking Mujin's planet killer and are now at 87% of the process. Back on the Ark, Beck makes the order to charge the Renewal Earth's shields head-on, while Ahan cradles Mujin's baby and tells Mori to just wait for them to get his power back. This whole flashback sequence culminates with Mori and Mujin's clash, and then the story flashes forward to reveal that Mujin has gotten the better of our hero. He even blathers on about how Mori's first attack was pretty sharp, but he could see the pattern from his fifth attack, and from the seventh attack, the villain says he could pretty much read Mori's thoughts. We find that Mori has been pinned to a wall, but our hero recovers. Even so, he feels that his whole body is about to break just facing his archenemy. Mori wonders how many seconds he can hold out against Mujin as he prepares to set up for another clash. Meanwhile, Mujin asks Mori why he keeps on fighting in spite of being terrified. On top of that, he goes on and interviews our hero about why he risks his life for those who are only a burden to him, namely humanity. Mori says humans aren't a burden and that they're desperately trying to give him strength at this very moment. So no, he can't turn a blind eye towards them. Mujin continues his interview and asks our hero if he really thinks he can win when he's so scared. In reply, Mori basically parrots Heel's words and tells Mujin that running away is more embarrassing than being scared. Plus, nothing is useless, even the fear he feels and the people on Earth that Mujin treated as a burden and abandoned. Mori tells Mujin that he's a scumbag who bases his relationship solely on gain and loss and that he'll never understand how he feels. Mori finally gets ready to tussle. He breathes deep and focuses up, telling Mujin to laugh all he wants. Meanwhile, Mujin notices that Mori has clearly gotten weaker since last time they met and invites our hero to come at him. Mori sizes up Mujin and recognizes the gap in power they have with each other, so he decides to hold out for now. We finally get some action as Mujin tries to karate chop Mori, but our hero blocks it and counters with a couple of strikes of his own. All the while, he tells himself that he'll get his power from the land and his own weight. It works too, because he manages to drive his elbow in Mujin's midsection right after that. Mujin dashes backward and has a flashback of Taijin, while Mori lands a renewal recoilless Orang move. Mori plans on using every source of energy available to him, and at the same time, Mujin notices that Mori has reached that level of mastery. As he puts it, it's a level that he was in awe of, something that Mujin himself couldn't even dream of reaching back when he was still human. The two warriors stop flapping their gums and get back into action, as Mori forms a barrier around him. Mujin tries to hit our hero with an open palm strike, but Mori counters it with a kick before peppering his opponent with more well-placed shots. Even better, Mori manages to kick Mujin in the neck when he finds an opening right after they clash. Mori seemingly gets the upper hand when he barrages Mujin with more strikes, prompting the villain to remind himself of Taijin when he spots Mori about to bust out a recoilless spinning kick. Mujin then has an internal monologue about Mori's expertise level and ultimately decides to wholeheartedly respond to our hero's achievement. On the other hand, Mori notices that a single hit from Mujin would kill him, so our hero literally tries to beat his enemy to the punch, but Mujin manages to land his palm on Mori's chest. The Monkey King proves he's still a master martial artist even though this is the umpteenth time that he's been depowered, as Mujin notices that he was able to reduce the damage from his attack the moment it was about to hit him. Mujin commends Mori for the effort, but he knows his body's too weak to take his attack, so Mori still ends up with a huge gash on his right shoulder. Our hero recovers, but Mujin wastes no time to take advantage of this opportunity and knee Mori in the gut. Mujin tries to hit Mori again, but he counters with recoilless Goryo, which nearly breaks Mujin's arm before hitting him right in the chin with it. Mujin is forced to reset, while Mori charges up a bunch of other techniques like Orang, Ground Scrape, Spinning Kick, 3-stage, Ice Pick, and Dragon Snatch before pulling out another recoilless move. No payoff just yet, because the story shifts its focus on Earth, where all the remaining humans are currently boarding the supergiant arcs that Dewi and Mira created earlier. In another unnecessary turn of events, former Apricot Flower High School student Drabu accidentally uses his necromancer ability to turn a few random dudes into zombies, which causes a stampede near one of the supergiant arcs. There aren't any casualties though, because Dewi and Mira use their respective powers to just teleport the remaining humans on the ground onto the arc until each and every person on Earth is safely boarded. Back on Renewal Earth, Mori remembers his grandpa Taijin's lesson about fighting Mujin, that you have to finish him off fast or else he'll just figure out all of your patterns. Because remember, Mujin might be a grade A scumbag, but he used to be a martial artist first and foremost, before all this borrowed power nonsense. In the present, Mujin proves that he's still a martial arts genius when he tells Mori that he may not be able to see his movements, but he can predict our hero's moves based on where he aims his strikes. Mujin then taunts Mori and tells him he wants to see the look on his face once he destroys the old world. Unknown to him, Isaac and his Generation X pals have completed hacking the planet-destructive weapon. Mujin then launches another blast from his giant cannon to destroy Earth, all the while tussling with our hero. But he's surprised to find out that it didn't obliterate the world, it just left a huge crater in it. Mujin wonders how the Earth is still intact even though it took a direct hit from his weapon. And we learned that a bunch of minor and supporting characters from the past like Jose, Alexandros, and Pumwang, along with several more of our hero's allies, have banded together to use all their strength to counter the weapon's blast. At the same time, non-borrowed power users continue their efforts to support our heroes by amassing more energy to give to them. Even better, they've re-established contact with the Ark. Oh, and it turns out Mori Jung is still alive for some reason, and he's doing his part to protect Earth too. Meanwhile, Mori is reminded of Ahan, as he insists that humanity is not a burden. Our hero knows there's no time to be frustrated right now. Somewhere else, Mira and Dewi launch their Earth Exodus initiative and send an armada of supergiant arcs containing what's left of humanity toward Renewal Earth. At the same time, Uma decides to follow our heroes to Mujin's promised land in hopes of handing back the cane of the sage to Dewi. She brings Jung along with her too. Back on the Ark, Beck tells his crew to blast a single point in Renewal Earth's shield so that their ship could pierce through it. All the while, Ahan senses a tremendous amount of energy and is surprised to find out that Mujin's deformed daughter can control it by herself. Dean tells everyone that they can't control this energy the same way they did with the Holy Grail, while Bongram comments that what's important is the child's will. That is to say, she needs to make a choice on her own. Bongram then tells Ahan to take the baby to Mori. Back at the central tower, Mujin asks Mori if he's done. We also find out that Eve's still there as she does some color commentary on her hero and his arch-nemesis duel instead of actually helping out in the battle. And for some reason, a few other Generation X kids are there too. Meanwhile, Eve does a poor play-by-play of what's happening on the battlefield by literally saying that Mori's trying to do something with his skills, but there's too much difference in power. Thankfully, the focus shifts back to the main players, as Mujin continues to punish Mori with invisible strikes that open up her hero. Eve continues her own commentary while this is all going down, but we're just going to mostly ignore it. Back to the fight, Mujin sneaks in a Longinus strike behind Mori, but our hero leaps out of the way before it could hit him. He counters with a kick of his own, and their battle rocks the place so hard that debris starts to fall off its ruined fixtures. A couple of random Generation X kids cover their heads to avoid getting hit by the debris, but Eve just stares at the battle in front of her like an idiot. As for Mujin, he shows that he still really cares for his genetic experiments when he tells the Generation X kids to get themselves someplace safe. On the other hand, he gets instantly enraged when he spots Mori saving another random Generation X kid from the debris. Mujin hits him with another invisible strike while our hero's distracted and tells the same kid that he just saved that he's okay. Meanwhile, Mujin can't believe that Mori's still standing even after hitting him dead on with his recent technique. Mori then recovers and admits that he's scared. Still, he knows he shouldn't focus on his fear and instead try to find a way to damage Mujin. Meanwhile, Mujin is actually impressed that his arch-nemesis is still standing after his barrage. So he scans Mori's body and learns about Heal's nanomachine, which is currently suppressing the Longinus mark that Mujin had left on Mori's heart. Mori steps up to Mujin, who thinks that our hero has a death wish. They clash again, and Mori is able to dodge his enemy's salvo. All the while, Mori continues to think of a way to damage Mujin, but he gets blasted in the gut before he could come up with an answer. Mujin capitalizes on this moment and prepares to blow Mori's head off with his Longinus ability at point-blank range. Meanwhile, the Ark continues to struggle to break through Renewal Earth's shield. At the same time, Isaac dumps some exposition on us and says that he and his fellow Generation X peers can't hack Renewal Earth's shield. And if that wasn't bad enough, the supergiant arcs that are headed their way will surely get obliterated by the interfaces. So Isaac comes up with a different plan to access the interface server. As he puts it, if hacking is not possible, they'll use the main route to get through. Back at the central tower, Mugen almost kills Mori, but his Subudi staff suddenly jumps in and blocks the villain's attack. Mori then grabs his pole and starts swinging it until he hits Mugen with a recoilless strike that lands right on the man's arm. But just when we thought that Mori now has the upper hand, Mugen just shrugs off his Subudi strike and grabs Mori's pole from him. He even commends Heel for the improvements she did to the nanomachine she gave to Mori. Then the villain starts to crush the Subudi staff with his bare hand, even talking some smack about how the whole idea that these weapons have quote-unquote the greatest hardness is a big lie. In the meantime, Mori barely keeps his composure while thinking of a way to get out of this predicament. He ultimately recalls Mugen's strongest skill, his Longinus ability, the same technique he used to defeat him, Dewey, and Satan in the past. As if on cue, Mugen prepares to launch a Longinus strike on Mori, but our hero finesses his way to lock Mugen's arm and redirect his strike towards his own body. Simply put, Mori has just used Mugen's own power to his own advantage. In fact, even Mugen can't believe that our hero was able to pull off this move. Meanwhile, Eve finally contributes something to the story when her commentary reveals that Mori's recent move was effective, but it only left a shallow wound on Mugen. Back on the battlefield, Mori tries to go for the same move a second time, but Mugen catches on and uses his other hand to counter his diverted Longinus strike. Mori notices how Mugen was able to neutralize his own technique with the same skill in a split second, but the villain still takes a hit and ends up coughing up blood after they reset. Mugen commends Mori for getting this far before telling him how he really wants to see the look on our hero's face when he massacres everyone he loves. Mugen does this by summoning both Bandros and the Mandala, and sending out the two devastating weapons to attack everyone on the Ark. Dean is able to sense the incoming attack with his precognitive ability, but they're too late to do anything about it, as the Mandala starts wreaking havoc all over the Ark a second later. Bangrim almost gets hit, but she uses her staff to block the magical dagger. Still, it's not enough to stop the Mandala, prompting Dean to intervene and rescue his friend. The Mandala then buzzes off and focuses on murdering other random world government operatives instead, and when it's done poking holes in them, it shoots towards Mugen's baby. Beck jumps in and protects the infant with his trademark bat, but the Mandala just pierces him through the gut and right toward the baby. However, Mugen's kid survives thanks to Dean coming up clutch and using his resonance to move the baby to the side and out of the Mandala's trajectory before it could hit her. Back at the central tower, Mugen senses that something is off, as he thoughtlessly mangles Mori's leg when our hero tries to sneak in a kick to his face. But Mori immediately recovers and manages to pepper his enemy with strikes. And even though Mugen tears up Mori again right after that, he can't help but ask why our hero isn't giving up. In the meantime, Mori continues to think of a way to take out Mugen. Meanwhile, humanity has arrived in Renewal Earth's atmosphere, but the Mandala threatens to kill each and every person aboard the supergiant arcs. Mori senses this and summons his ice pick to save the Mandala's current target before summoning all of his dragon staves to protect them. This makes Mugen realize that some of Mori's true power is back, as the two warriors clash again. Mugen further analyzes his opponent and wonders if Mori has really reached the so-called level of transcendence. Meanwhile, our hero just does his best to keep a cool head and a fiery heart to find a way to change the situation. Mori pretty much concludes that he's not going to give up when he tells himself that he'll attack Mugen 100 or even 200 times until he manages to land a clean blow on the guy. Somewhere else, Isaac and his squad of Generation X crew hackers hit a snag when Renewal Earth's system counterhacks them. In another place still, other Generation X kids, the ones who didn't come with Hio and Mori, prepare to have a vote to decide if they should let humanity take refuge on Renewal Earth. Back at the central tower, Mugen gets the upper hand, but Mori just gets back on his feet, prompting Mugen to lunge at him once again. Curiously enough, Mori notices Mugen's movement slowing down right before his very eyes. He begins to wonder if Mugen's going easy on him or if time is moving slowly. We then get an answer when Mugen realizes that Mori's moves have started to resemble Taijin's own martial arts techniques, which make it seem like our hero's operating at breakneck speeds due to the unpredictability of his movements, which in turn gives Mori the additional perk of superhuman reflexes. Mugen gets all hyped from this realization and tells his archenemy to go higher and higher. As a matter of fact, Mori almost gets the upper hand during their clash when he almost pulls off another counterattack against Mugen, but Mugen thinks on his feet and manages to drive away Mori before he can pull it off. Still, our hero just charges at him again, telling himself the same thing over and over again, that if he fails 10 times, he'll strike 100 times and 200 times until Mugen is taken down. Mori goes for a kick just as his leg muscles rupture, which leaves him open for Mugen to hit him with a Longinus strike at point-blank range. Mori gets knocked down, but he gets up again because Mugen's never going to keep him down. Our hero then tells Mugen that he's going to save everyone when he asks him why he keeps on getting back on his feet. Mugen doesn't believe it, knowing that Mori can't do anything in his current condition. But in Mori's own words, power or whatever, he doesn't give a damn. He's just going to save everyone, whether it's humanity or the executives or even Generation X as an afterthought. Meanwhile, Eve continues staring at them like the brainwashed moron that she is. And she seemingly can't even comprehend it when Mori addresses her directly and asks for Generation X's help to foil Mugen's plans. Specifically, Mori tells Eve that he doesn't want Generation X to turn out like Mugen, so they should open the shield and let humanity in. Mori's whole spiel makes Mugen laugh, telling our hero that he's also going down the same road as those weak-minded losers who place their lives in the hands of others. The long and short of it is that Mugen thinks Mori's pathetic for begging Generation X to help him right now. Mugen then finishes grandstanding and prepares to end this nonsense, telling Mori he doesn't want to see him like this anymore. Mugen uses a technique called Satan's Double Wings Full Open, which is exactly as it sounds. Mugen then tells Mori that he'll give him the kind of death that resembles his name, as he charges energy in his right hand and lunges at our hero. Mori's too exhausted to move, and he can feel his vision blurring and focusing on Mugen alone. Our hero knows Mugen's attack is going to kill him if it lands, but Mori remembers he could just redirect it back at him. So Mori goes for another counterattack, but Mugen's gotten so juiced out that Mori's body can't even maintain its form when he tries to lock his enemy's arm. But as if on cue, the blade of Tathagata stabs Mugen right in the hand before he can land his deadly blow on Mori. We then find out that Mira and Dewi have conveniently arrived to help our hero in this duel. And given that Dewi now has the Cane of the Sage, it's implied that Uma's somewhere on Renewal Earth right now too. Dewi and Mira then tell their best friend that they're going to support him while he looks for an opening to beat Mugen's face in. The married couple waste no time to double-team their archenemy, which culminates in Dewi using the Book of the Old Deer to trap Mugen with tree roots, while Mira follows up with a barrage of swords to impale him. But Mugen just easily breaks free from the trap after Dewi and Mira's attack. Dewi hurls a literal moon at Mugen, but he just blocks it with his finger and crushes the thing. Meanwhile, Eve continues to watch the fight in amazement, especially the coordinated attacks of our three heroes. However, unless our heroes are in 100% condition, the chances of them winning are against them. The only worthwhile contribution she makes is that she reveals Heel's nanomachine is nearly at its limit and Mori might croak at any second. Meanwhile, Mugen almost gouges out Mira's one remaining eye, but Argo deftly counters with an upward slash that allows Dewi to rush in and go for a punch. However, Mugen is able to block Dewi's attack with a barrier. Even worse, he has just summoned the Bell of 108 Agonies. Dewi accidentally hits the bell, and it causes a huge resonant ding that knocks our heroes away. At the same time, Eve continues to stare at the battle and unsurprisingly, presumptuously declares Mugen to be the winner of this scuffle even though the battle is far from over, as our heroes continue to dig deep and triple-team their arch-nemesis. Mugen catches Mira's blade, and at the same time Mori's weakened heart finally gives out. He's knocked down, but Dewi comes up clutch and catches her boy. Mori then whispers unintelligible coordinates to Dewi, who says okay before telling his wife to take care of Mugen for a moment. Mugen gets overconfident and starts talking smack, pretty much telling Mira that she stands no chance against him, given that she's the weakest among the three. Mira just shrugs it off and focuses on the battle, vowing that she'll pay her debt to everyone. Mira rushes Mugen, all the while remembering her former master's lessons. It culminates with Mira declaring herself to be the representative of humanity, as she attacks Mugen with the blade of Tathagata and her entire arsenal of national treasures. The two warriors get into a heated clash, and Mugen is humbled when he realizes that Mira has reached the same level of combat mastery as the late Hanryang Seo. He apologizes to Mira for underestimating her, and they reset. Nearby, Eve can sense that Mori's heart is about to stop instead of actually helping our hero. A random Generation X member asks Mori how he managed to keep on moving until now. Suddenly, huge rocks started to fall down onto the Generation X kids. Our Monkey King is forced to move and save them yet again. Mori even pats Eve's empty noggin and tells these Generation X turncoats to stay away from this place, since it's too dangerous. But Eve remains as petulant as ever. Instead of hoofing it out of there just as Mori says, she flaps her gums and asks her hero the same question Mugen has been asking him during their battle. Why does he keep on getting back up again? Mori doesn't want to waste any more time on this nuisance, so he keeps his answer short. He keeps on fighting because his best friends are fighting. And if they're fighting, that means there's still a chance. Mori then tells the Generation X kids to watch him from a safe place while he shows them a miracle. All the while, Mugen and Mira continue to duke it out in the middle of the battlefield. Mugen thinks he's gotten the better of our heroine when he finds an opening and threatens to blast Mira with a Longinus strike. But Mira remembers one specific lesson that Ryu told her in the past, that in a life-threatening moment, you can take half a step forward to perform the quote-unquote ultimate Wogang swordsmanship. Mira does exactly that and she successfully lands an overhead slash on Mugen. Our hero then switches her grip and lands another strike on the enemy with her blade. And from there, Mira just goes to town on Mugen, slicing and dicing him up until he flatlines. But Mugen proves that he is a genius martial artist when he copies Mori's counterattack move and manages to redirect Mira's blade right back at her. Mugen even talks trash and tells her he should thank Mori for allowing him to learn this new skill. What he doesn't know is that Mira accounted for this exact moment. because Mori suddenly pops up right behind Mujin while he's distracted. And this time, our hero has loaded up his trademark recoilless Jin Hui choke technique. Mira makes sure to deal the most damage to Mujin that they can, so she hurls one of her swords right into his chest. Knowing that Mujin's wound from his recent scrap against Mori hasn't completely healed yet, the Monkey King then lands his recoilless Jin Hui choke square on Mujin's face, vowing that he won't let anything slide from the ground to the air and even his toes. The problem is that Mori's Hui choke does nothing to even remotely damage Mujin. Even worse, the villain breaks his leg right after that. This prompts Mira to swoop in and rescue her best friend. They gain some distance from Mujin, but the man still gets Mira when he slices off her left shoulder. Mujin then talks some smack and literally lets his hair down before saying something super cliched. He explains to Mori that he can't damage him if he doesn't have his full strength. Pretty much without his powers, he's nothing. Eve panics as she sees Mori's last chance fading away. But now he's able to give his opponents the fullest extent of his powers since he doesn't have to focus on treating the chest wound that he got from Mori. Mujin continues running his mouth, telling our heroes that he could kill them in an instant if he so much as tightens one of his muscles. Meanwhile, Mori knows his body can't hold out any longer and seemingly accepts defeat. But as if on cue, Dewi reappears on the battlefield, and we finally get some payoff to the thing that Mori whispered in his ear earlier. It turns out that Mori gave Dewi the coordinates to Satan's location. And now our hero has brought this maniac to the battlefield to serve as additional reinforcement for their crew. We then get a quick flashback of what happened to Satan after he and Mori got separated. The long and short of it is that Dewi fetches him in the end, and here we are. In the present, Dewi senses Satan's energy and knows that the young god has gotten even stronger. Mujin then directs his trash talk at Satan, telling him that he has a score to settle with him. Satan has no time for crap, so he just laughs and starts to tussle with Mujin. Credit where credit is due, because Satan pulls out all the stops right out of the gate, as he rushes Mujin and starts kicking him repeatedly. Mujin protects himself with a barrier and summons the Bell of 108 Agonies. He uses the artifact to drive Satan away, but the Devil Boy mimics the sound blast that came out of the bell from his mouth. Their clash cracks the ground beneath them open, and Mujin is forced to save his Generation X underlings by trapping them each in a protective bubble. This allows Satan to find an opening and get close to Mujin. He tells him to just look at him and don't mind those things. Satan unleashes a kick that Mujin barely evades, while the demigod comments on Satan's fighting style. As he puts it, Satan's power is quote-unquote overwhelming the skills. He goes on to say that it's no skill, it's pure power. Mujin ultimately concludes that Satan's style is the complete opposite of Mori Jin's, as the young devil unleashes a technique called random kicking, which is self-explanatory. Meanwhile, Dewi tries to wake Mori up and realizes he might need to use what's left of his energy to revive his best friend. He tries to do so, but Mori tells him to revive Mira instead. Dewi makes the hard choice and goes for Mira before ultimately deciding to put his life on the line to save both of his closest companions. Dewi, on the other hand, realizes he doesn't have enough power to save both his best friends. He questions himself about his role as the Jade Emperor if he can't even save a person's life. Dewi shrugs off all the doubt and decides to go all out and put his life on the line. In the meantime, Eve continues to watch everything unfold, and it seems she's too dumb to even remember Mori's answer to her question earlier because she continues to ask why our heroes aren't giving up. Meanwhile, the other Generation X kids proceed with their vote. Some are fine with allowing humanity to take refuge on Renewal Earth, while others remain true to their nature and remain a xenophobic species who don't want refugees in their territory. Back on the battlefield, Satan and Mujin continue to try and cave each other's head in. Satan uses a technique called Odin's two arms to grow, arms, and proceeds to barrage Mujin with punches. Mujin counters with his 1,000 hands technique and the clash ends in another stalemate. Curiously, Satan seemingly implodes until he turns into a puddle of blood with a white cross in the middle of it. But it turns out that this is a technique called Resurrection of Blood, which allows Satan to resurrect himself using every drop of his blood, but still without arms. Mujin does a quick exposition dump about how time is slower in the heavenly realm compared to the living world, which means only a few hours have passed for Satan since their last fight. His point is that Mujin is super surprised that Satan has grown this much in just a few hours. Mujin knows that he can't drag this fight out, while Satan gets battle crazy and revels in the fact that he gets to have another deadly fight against their archenemy. Somewhere else, people on the Ark watch a live feed of Mori and Mujin's duel while an astronaut enters their ship. Youngji Park then shoehorns the same girl who likes to film people without permission into the story by having the astronaut, who happens to come from the Ark, recruit her to do a live stream of what's going on right now. Oh, and she even has a name, Yura. We then get a few flashbacks of Eve from her time with Mori when our Monkey King told her that he won't run away anymore, the moment when Isaac decides to sacrifice himself, and the time with Heel when she suggested a coexistence of humans from Earth and Generation X in Renewal Earth. This transitions into the present. The Generation X kids reveal the results of their vote, with 42 in favor of letting humans settle on Renewal Earth, 55 against it, and 3 abstentions. Isaac is not too happy with the results, but follows the rule of the law. An unnamed Generation X kid is just about to formally announce the outcome of the vote when Eve inserts herself into the scene. Things just get more unhinged from here, as Eve tells everyone that she's the temporary leader of Generation X because Miguel appointed her that position before he went out of commission. And just when we need it the most, there's neither flashback nor exposition dump here either. It just happens out of nowhere, so it is what it is. Even more asinine is when Eve pulls out a so-called super card, which basically ignores the rule of law and allows the leader of Generation X to do whatever the hell they want. In this case, Eve just tells everyone that they'll accept quote-unquote the humanity from outside and everyone just goes along with it. Meanwhile, the supergiant arcs continue their approach toward Renewal Earth's surface, while Mugen and Satan continue their battle. Mugen manages to blast Satan with his Longinus ability, prompting Dewi to try and give the young devil some backup. But Satan tells him to not get in the way and just let him tear Mugen up with his own hands, which is ironic because he only has one remaining left. Back at the central tower, Mugen senses that Eve just screwed him over while the pink-haired kid gives him her trademark stupid look. We then get another plot development out of nowhere when Beck and crew members of the Ark declare that Renewal Earth's shield is gone, so their ship and the supergiant arcs make a beeline toward its surface. On the other hand, Mugen senses that all of Generation X has made their decision to allow humans entry to his promised land. Mugen finally pulls rank on these kids and straight up tells them that he refuses to accept Eve's supercard decision. So Mugen uses a move called Rejection Technique Activate, which he explains would reject all of the ideas rushing into the world. It's nothing too fancy, really, as we soon learn that this just covers Renewal Earth in a bunch of fast-spinning ribbons, which more or less act as a shield that obliterates anything that comes into contact with it. A few supergiant arcs containing a payload of human refugees get destroyed when they try to enter Renewal Earth, prompting Beck to give the order to halt their charge. Uma then arrives to try and destroy this new barrier and reveals that this is the same technique used to kill 80% of the monster troops back during the Heavenly War. Meanwhile, Mori's dragon staves ultimately fail to protect the supergiant arcs when the Mandala bursts through their defenses and starts destroying scores upon scores of these rescue vessels. Mori senses this as we see our exhausted hero sitting down with his body all broken from his previous fight. At the same time, Mugen and Satan continue their battle, while Beck tells everyone on the Ark to get ready to fire at full power. A crew member tells him that the ship's fuselage won't be able to take it, but Beck refuses to listen and proceeds with the order. The Ark lets out a single blast of energy, which does nothing to Renewal Earth's ribbon barrier. The NOA's engine room explodes and instead just destroys the ship's wings due to engine overload. Even worse, the damage caused by this ill-advised decision to fire at Renewal Earth's barrier ends up killing a ton of the Ark's crew members. And if that's not bad enough, a random government executive had to seal off the doors to the bridge to prevent further damages, which leaves the rest of the crew outside to perish. All that's left is Beck, Dean, Bongram, Ahan, Mugen's baby, and a few other unnamed world government operatives as the remaining survivors of the ship. Back on Renewal Earth, Satan tells Mori that he sensed his true power for a moment while he was in the Central Realm. Satan wonders what happened to our Monkey King, and our hero tells him it's because he lost his fight against Mugen. The Devil Boy then asks Mori if he really plans on beating Mugen even in his current state, and our hero's mind is really made up. Satan thinks it's absurd, but he doesn't judge Mori and instead tells him that he's actually worse. Back on the Ark, Dean and Bongram transfer the energy they gathered from the people of Earth and the world government executives to Mugen's deformed baby. Dean tells his allies that everything now hinges on the baby's decision. On the other hand, Ahan asks Bongram and Dean why she should be the one to go to Mori instead of either of them, considering that they're technically more powerful than Ahan. Dean says that his precognitive ability showed him that sending in Ahan with the baby would give them the best chances of succeeding in their mission, while Bongram tells her not to worry because they'll stay alive somehow. Beck then gets in on the action and volunteers to join Ahan in this quest, telling her that they should go to the ship's deck. They leave and Bongram asks Dean if he really saw Ahan in one of his visions. Dean pretty much admits he was blowing smoke out of his butt. He didn't really have a vision, just a gut feeling that Ahan is their best bet to do this mission. Besides, they'll get their answer soon enough. More bad news arrives when the Ark's remaining crew members find out that 40% of their ship's hull is out of commission, meaning that it's going down any second now. And just in case you forgot it already, the Mandala continues to destroy more of the supergiant arcs while all this drama is going down. Back at the central tower, Mori forces his body to move so that he can get back in action. Meanwhile, Ahan is on the Ark's deck, as she tells her adopted brother to just wait a little longer. Uma arrives and gives Ahan a quick pep talk, while Beck lifts up his bat and prepares to blow a hole through Renewal Earth's barrier. Beck then tells everybody that they just need to poke a hole large enough to send a baby through. Uma notices that Beck is at his limit, but he insists that he's ready for whatever happens. Beck then goes on this monologue about how he aims to repay all the deaths their side suffered just to get them here, and wonders if he did a good job leading humanity's forces in Ilpio's absence. Beck then has a quick flashback of his dad before asking Uma to help him with what he's about to do. Uma agrees and they finally get down to business. Beck and Uma combine their strength to blow a hole through the barrier, while the rest of their allies lend them even more energy to proceed with the mission. In the meantime, Ahan promises Mujin's baby that she'll protect it with her life. Beck and Uma soon manage to create a big enough hole for Ahan and the baby. He uses every last remaining ounce of his strength to hold it and keep it open, while the Ark lets out one final blast in an attempt to shatter the ribbon shield. The arc beam goes straight through and towards Mujin, and the villain easily blocks it with his shield. The arc explodes and nearly everyone in it dies, including Beck. On the other hand, a handful of the Ark's crew, Dean and Bongra, manage to survive the blast for some reason, and we see them at an as-yet unspecified spot not too far away from the ship. Beck then entrusts his friends to all the remaining survivors, and the genius finally bites the dust. Meanwhile, Mori senses someone calling his name and soon recognizes it's Ahan, as she drops down towards his location with Mujin's baby in tow. Mori gets a second wind, so gets back on his feet, while Mujin seemingly senses Ahan and his disowned baby's arrival. Back on Renewal Earth's atmosphere, the Ark's destruction leaves a trail of world government operatives' corpses floating aimlessly in space. Uma gives Beck's lifeless body one last hug, and turns into dust too alongside her lover. Now, God of High School's next chapter starts with an uncharacteristically succinct and outright interesting flashback detailing Satan's origins. As the story goes, no one knows where or how he was born. He just popped up one day. A dumpster baby deep in the bottom of the Heavenly Realm's lowest rung. This place happens to be populated by monsters that were cast out from the higher levels of the Heavenly Realm, and they pretty much served as baby Satan's caretakers the moment they spotted him in their domain. After a time, Satan gained consciousness and witnessed that his dumpster basically goes by Darwinian rules. It's survival of the fittest, where bigger monsters eat all the other smaller monsters. And Satan being the genius that he is, it didn't take long before he found himself standing at the top of this dumpster domain. Some time would pass and Satan would grow up into a young man in the Heavenly Realm's lowest level, and this is around the period when he got it into his head to try and climb to the higher levels. Satan eventually did so, and he soon witnessed the Monkey King's fateful duel with Tathagata, that exact moment when our hero lobotomized this scummy god by driving Yoi into his skull. Instead of getting terrified like a wuss, seeing this gave Satan a clear goal, to become the strongest one there is. So Satan went through a bloody trail climbing the rest of the Heavenly Realm's rungs until he reached the top of the second floor, where Michael the Archangel and Uriel invited him to join them. In the present, Mori spots Dewi trying to heal Amira, while he struggles to get back on his feet to link up with Ahan and Mujin's baby. He tries to leap out of the battlefield, but his right leg's completely unstable due to the damages sustained earlier. But thankfully, Ryong picks up the slack and does our hero a solid by flinging himself right in front of Mori while still in his Dragonbone Spear form. Mori then uses Ryong to vault over the battlefield. Mujin spots our hero and he immediately senses the arrival of the daughter he abandoned along with Ahan. Mujin gets all aggressive, but the demigod can't do anything about these newcomers because Satan grabs him by the shoulder to scrap some more. Mujin is able to counter Satan's attack by slashing him a couple times in a cross shape, while Dewi uses the creation of all things technique to help his wife recover from her injuries. But Mira's wounds are too deep, and to further complicate matters, he can't fully focus on healing Mira because Mujin keeps taking pot shots at them. This makes Dewi realize that Mujin's not even going all out in his duel with Satan, given that the man is keeping them in check while duking it out with the young devil. Another flashback shows Tathagata addressing the other gods as he blathers on about the prophecy. At the time, he told his fellow scumbag gods that he'll be taking his eternal slumber as soon as his disciples reach India. Michael tries to convince Tathagata to give up this whole prophecy crap, but he insists that it's super necessary. As Tathagata puts it, he was once human too, and the long and short of it is that he must be reborn to become a bona fide supreme god. He then pretty much tells his godly pals to behave themselves while he's gone so as to prevent chaos from erupting in his absence. He even hands Beelzebub a gross fetus of himself, which he literally calls his flesh, as a safeguard in case the prophecy isn't real. Tathagata's instructions are clear. The other gods should scatter his flesh across the human world if this was the case. In the present, Satan dumps some exposition on Mujin, telling him that Tathagata's flesh was scattered across the earth near the end of Ragnarok. He then asks Mujin a question. Does he think he became a god out of his own free will? Oh, and Satan has arms again, which is cool. Dewi is able to hear all this and recalls the time he surmised Mujin's body might be accelerating Tathagata's resurrection. Satan continues his exposition by telling Mujin that the fragments of Tathagata latched themselves to humans and bided their time, waiting for the one who would revive the supreme god. Satan even goes on to explain the full specs of Tathagata's creepy flesh. As it goes, they don't affect humans physically. Instead, Tathagata's flesh fans the flames of one's desire to an extreme degree. And while the young devil's whole point is that Mujin didn't become a god because he wanted to, the truth is Mujin is just a chump who got influenced by Tathagata's flesh. Mujin knows this to be true and asks Satan which of his desires Tathagata affected that made him want to become a god. Satan says it's Mujin's desire for his own salvation and the salvation of humanity. From here, Satan just mocks Mujin by pretty much calling him a corny-ass crusader-type fool. And the bottom line is that Mujin and Tathagata aren't so different. They're both a couple of scumbags who think the ends justify the means. Satan then stresses the fact that Mujin is deluding himself if he thinks he actually swallowed Tathagata, asking the villain if he really thinks the Supreme God will just back off and allow Mujin to prevent his revival after swallowing him. What's more is that Satan knows Mujin isn't using the full extent of his powers not because he wants to give our heroes a handicap, it's because he's afraid that Tathagata will end up swallowing him if he does. And you gotta hand it to this young devil, he really is a genius when it comes to seeing through his opponent's crap. Satan even knows that Mujin tried to end himself after getting rid of the gods because he's terrified that Tathagata is going to take control of him. Mujin evades the question and tries to change the subject, while Satan ups the stakes by reclaiming the power he claims he had forgotten to stop Mujin to the curb. Satan starts to transform, while Mujin does a good job hiding the fact that he's actually getting scared of Satan. See, Mujin knows that this young devil just keeps on rushing him no matter how much he tries to break or take away parts of his body. In fact, he gets stronger each time he incurs damage. Mujin then makes the questionable decision of turning toward Eve and telling her that Satan's level is what these genetic aberrations should surpass. Mujin then turns towards Satan and tells him that stamping him out is his final task. He even talks some smack and pretty much calls the young devil a piece of trash that he has to take out before Mujin checks out. Their battle restarts, and Mujin tries to wreck Satan with his Longinus ability. Satan gets hurt so bad that he starts having another flashback, this time to the period right after the Monkey King put him to sleep in the aftermath of their duel. At the time, the gods of the First Heavenly Realm were trying to decide who should be their next leader. Satan took advantage of the opportunity and threw his name into the proverbial hat only to get his ass kicked by Beelzebub, his first ever defeat. However, his old pal Odin approached him right after the scrap and pretty much gave the young devil a pep talk to just keep on training until he beats Beelzebub. And while Satan ultimately proved that he was not one to be messed with when all it took him was half a day after his first defeat to ascend to the position of Master of the Heavenly Realm, presumably after beating Beelzebub in their rematch. Satan's thoughts then drift toward memories of his best pal, Odin, and the heart-to-heart he and Mori had in Odin's hall. In the present, Mujin is surprised to find out that the wings he stole from Satan earlier are now starting to come back to its owner. Satan then transforms one more time as he grows 12 wings and a halo over his head, all the while declaring that he'll surpass Mujin. Mujin knows that this is Satan's original form and vows to break the young devil for good. Meanwhile, Ahan and Mori are on their way to link up with each other. All the while, Satan and Mujin continue to beat the living snot out of each other. On the other hand, Mujin senses his bastard baby coming closer and closer with every passing second. So he summons his resurrection scrolls once again and activates its power. Say what you will, but the man knows how to multitask, because he's doing all this while in the middle of his duel with Satan. Meanwhile, people on the supergiant arcs notice that Renewal Earth's ribbon barrier has stopped spinning. But more trouble instantly arrives when the Mandala shoots out of nowhere and starts taking out even more of these refugee ships. Debris from the supergiant arc rains down from the atmosphere and towards Renewal Earth. Ahan's freefall becomes even more dangerous because of all the flaming pieces raining down toward the surface, forcing our heroine to do some parkour as she platforms around the debris to clear a path toward Mori. But then one of Mujin's resurrected undead warriors tried to attack Ahan. She uses her borrowed power to fend it off before freefalling once more. Ahan even takes note of the fact that her big bro has been fighting enemies this strong this whole time. Things get dicier for Ahan when an entire squad of undead warriors attack her, but she deftly shoots past them and evades all their other potshots. Finally, Ahan and Mori get to shouting distance from each other, but the undead warriors just keep on tailing her. So she digs deep and uses her borrowed power to summon an artifact called National Treasure Blooming Gonyojo and uses it to destroy the squad of undead warriors in one swing. Ahan loses sight of Mori for a second, but they immediately spawn each other. This time, they're within striking distance from each other. They're just about to link up when even more undead warriors attack Ahan. They almost stab her in the throat, but Mori reaches her just in time for a hug before instantly destroying these monsters. Presumably with the power of love. Mori takes a few hits from the creatures, but he's able to obliterate them. A straggler tries to backstab our hero, but Ahan slices it off with a wave of her hand. Finally, these siblings are able to get down to business, as Ahan tells her brother that she came here to give him some energy. The baby starts to glow, and a technique called Manifest Miracle shoots out to destroy even more of Mujin's undead warriors. Mujin senses this on the ground and gets enraged. Stupid move though, because he gets distracted from his bout with Satan, allowing the young devil to drive his bare hand through Mujin's chest and grab him by the heart Kali Ma style. Well, technically it's Satan's heart, the same one that Mujin stole from him earlier. Satan thinks he's won this tussle, but Mujin suddenly grabs him by the arm and gives him a death stare, calling him a worthless, insignificant god. Satan instantly folds after sensing Mujin's aura change. As he puts it, he can feel Mujin's presence becoming that of a bona fide supreme god. Mujin's aura is powerful enough to make Satan cry and drive him to his knees. Mujin then tries to finish the job and orders Satan to die. The young devil is compelled to do so he prepares to stab himself in the throat with his bare hand. But Satan is able to brute force his way out of Mujin's influence when he remembers Odin calling him the one and only master of the first heavenly realm and the leader of the gods. So Satan shakes off Mujin's control and immediately lunges at the villain. getting ready to take a bite out of the man's face. Above the skies of Renewal Earth, Mujin's kid starts coughing profusely, and Mori realizes that it's carrying too much power for a literal baby to control. But then Mori speculates that maybe it's confused about its blood. All of a sudden, Mujin appears right in front of our heroes, and we find out he's just torn apart Satan limb from limb. Mujin's not too happy that this bastard baby is still alive, so he immediately tries to commit infanticide by blasting it, Mori, and Ahan with his Longinus ability. At that same moment, Dewi tells Mira that he's going to leave the rest up to her. And you know our boy's about to die because he has a flashback of the good times he's had with his best friend. A second later, Dewi has already teleported right in front of Mori, telling him to hurry and get up. Dewi catches the full force of Mujin's Longinus strike that bisects him in the blink of an eye. While all of our two heroes' memories of each other starts to appear, Mori can only look on as Mujin kills his best friend. God of High School's next chapter proves that it's so addicted to flashbacks that even Mujin's baby has one. Namely, the baby remembers how Mujin acted like a total deadbeat and abandoned her after calling her ugly and the lowest of the low, since his kid isn't a member of Generation X. The baby also remembers Beck's emotional meltdown before he discovered her powers. Then there's Ahan basically taking her in, and Dean and Bongram wishing them well before leaving the Ark. In the present, Mujin has just blown Dewi apart like a sack of meat when Mira suddenly appears behind him and starts swinging her sword. Mujin manages to dodge her attacks and states the obvious, that Mira still hasn't given up. The villain then summons his arsenal of weapons. Meanwhile, Mira tells herself that she's ready to die today, but not without accomplishing anything. Mira has an internal monologue about choosing her death and following the way of the sword. And to be fair, she actually does better than Dewi this time, as she manages to wreck a few of Mujin's weapons. However, Mujin soon chops off the blade of Tathagata and blows a hole through Mira's ample chest with the mandawa. But Mira's a trooper if nothing else. She doesn't just pass out like a total wuss. Instead, she uses every last ounce of her strength to get back at Mujin and stab him square in the chest. Mira makes sure to punish this villain by twisting the blade and yanking it to eviscerate her enemy. But Mujin's got some major plot armor going on, so he just eats it up and hurls Mira away before telling our heroes that this insane battle is over. We also learn that nearly all the supergiant arcs have already been destroyed and 99.99% of humanity has been eliminated just above the skies of Renewal Earth. Mujin does a quick recap of where Mori and his allies stand, and basically tells our hero that they've already lost. Mujin then starts spewing some of that typical smack and pretty much tells Mori that he's all talk and can't do anything to actually save everyone. Mujin goes on another faux intellectual rant about the privileges of power, as he gets ready to blast Mori, Ahan, and his baby to smithereens. In turn, Ahan tries to protect her big brother and stands between him and the blast. But Mori doubles down on his hero complex and jumps behind Ahan just as Mujin blasts them, so he ends up eating the full force of his attack. All the while telling Ahan that he doesn't plan on sitting back and watching just like last time. Mori then apologizes to Ahan and the baby for getting them mixed up in something way too dangerous. Mori apologizes and seemingly dies in front of Ahan and the baby. We then get shown several flashbacks of the baby's experiences around Mori, Ahan, Dean, and Bongram. Also when Mujin left her his yellow necklace before abandoning her. Youngji Park then explains this baby's first memories of abandonment, loneliness, and many other emotions she had experienced and seen, which are now etched into her mind. The plot finally moves forward again when the baby reaches out her deformed arm and grabs Mori's hand. In a hilarious turn of events, the baby starts calling Mori her daddy, effectively turning Mujin into a cuckolded deadbeat dad. It then does some annoying, near incomprehensible baby talk as she tells Mori to feel better, all the while latching onto Mori and continuing to call our hero its daddy. The baby then gets another flashback where we learn that Mori actually gave it a name, Taijin Park. The baby might be a girl, but it's a tribute to Mori's late grandpa, so just roll with it, okay? In the present, we get a full view of Taijin, and Mujin wasn't wrong, she really is one ugly baby. We then get a drawn-out sequence of this baby just insisting that Mori's her daddy for a few pages before the story finally progresses and the narrator spoon-feeds us information about the child giving back everything she had received until now. The narrator then lists a bunch more of emotions tied to Taijin, like excitement, tenderness, warmth, and courage, as this deformed kid races the pendant that her biological dad, Mujin, left her. Taijin then lodges the pendant into the gaping cross-shaped hole in the middle of Mori's chest, which conveniently removes the curse of Longinus on our hero's heart. Mori starts monologuing about Mujin throwing away stuff, like the pendant, which we now learn is properly named the Saintess's Cross, Old Humanity, and his own kid Taijin, which apparently now has been given the title Son of Man. In the meantime, Taijin grows wings, which makes her look like a cherub pulled straight from a Clive Barker story. And the narrator spoon-feeds us some more by telling us that Taijin and Mori are now combining their powers to make a miracle. Mujin tries to stop this with a technique called Stigmata Stigma, but Taijin conveniently busts out her borrowed power, which is revealed to be Mansuk. The baby then uses a technique literally called Miracle, which forms a giant cross above Renewal Earth before it grows wings and covers the entire planet with bright yellow ribbons of light. These ribbons then extend to the supergiant arcs and become stairs that the old world's human refugees descend. Mori notices that everyone's power has started flowing into him as soon as they touch the stairs. These same people then start praying, while Monsook's spirit approaches Mujin. On the other hand, Wanzang's spirit is now here too, and she gives Mori his trademark crown. The spirits then leave, and our hero realizes that the whole prophecy mumbo-jumbo is actually talking about Mujin's baby. Make no mistake though, the battle between Mujin and Mori isn't over. In fact, Mujin gets ready to backstab our hero as soon as Monsook's spirit leaves. Meanwhile, Taijin does some more convenient magic. And, well, God of High School shows us one of its most notorious instances of anticlimactic cop-outs when Taijin literally brings every fallen hero that has died in this war back to life, like Ilpio, Sujin, Q, and Beck. And this is only explained as another miracle explosion. The cross on Mori's chest starts to glow again, and Youngji Park plasters the word miracle on the page again. On the other hand, Eve watches all this unfold and is in awe of what's going on around her. For some reason, Satan's back in action too, and this series of bonkers miracle explosions make the young devil realize the role he's supposed to play in all this. He sacrifices himself and gives his remaining powers to Odin, but not before turning into a girl for some reason. Yep, that happened. Satan then says he'll reclaim his true name as he summons his 12 double wings and transforms into the Archangel Lucifer. His wings then shoot up into the sky while everyone watches. All the while, random Generation X kids state the obvious and keep saying that what's happening is a miracle. And if that's not enough, we get another big panel with just the word miracle written all over it. Yes, we get it. It's a miracle. The plot thankfully moves forward again, as Satan's wings surround Renewal Earth. Even more convenient is when we find out that both Dewi and Mira are alive, as they lend their power to Mori. Mujin tries to attack Mori, but Satan's wings protect him, all the while covering the entirety of Renewal Earth. The narrator then yaps on again about how there are miracles on top of miracles within miracles all coming together at this moment like some corporate megachurch-style service. But the main point is that this asinine turn of events has made an event with only a 0.0000000000001% of happening actually become a reality. The insufferable prophecy then gets narrated again, while Mori awakens with his signature Monkey King eyes while still being protected by Satan's wings. God of High School's next chapter begins with yet another flashback, this time from Ahan. It's a thankfully short one where Ahan pretty much reverts to her old self, by which we mean she gets all insecure that Mori might leave her if her big brother gets his power back. In the present, Satan's wings dissipate and uncover Renewal Earth. Mori hatches out of his makeshift Satan wing shell at the same time to reveal that he's all juiced out with power. Meanwhile, Ahan thinks that this is without a doubt the birth of a new myth, as Mori emerges in his true form. The narrator then gives us the hard sell and calls Mori the literal god of high school. All the while, Mujin and Mori square up to each other and get ready for their final showdown. Ahan spots the crossmark on his back glowing, and then the story shifts its focus to a bunch of the saga's minor and supporting characters to prove that, yes, Youngji Park totally reneged on the character deaths and everyone who died during this war is alive again, whether it's Ilpio, Dusik Kim, or Q. It's even implied that the random unnamed humans who died on the Supergiant arcs have all been resurrected with Taijin's miracle ability. Everyone who was resurrected hugs their beloved ones as they enjoy a moment of joy seeing them alive again. On top of that, we get to see that Isaac's not sick anymore. Heel's alive again and they reunite, and Heel's long-dead son is even resurrected. Oh, and then there's this super insignificant dude too, named Gidong Na, who's revealed to be one of the newly revived characters. In any case, this whole sequence culminates with Ahan pretty much echoing Youngji Park's sentiments, as she tells Mori that she's going to milk this story her whole life. Ilpio senses that something has changed with Mori, while Mujin feels the opposite and wonders if our hero really did get his original strength back. In the meantime, Mori calls on Gyeondamun, while Ahan continues to wallow in her insecurities. Her doldrums are broken when Mori gets all goofy with her and Taijin, who doesn't have wings anymore. Mori plays with Taijin a bit and in front of the baby's biological dad. Mori then apologizes to Ahan for making her worry and thanks his adopted deformed daughter for choosing him to be the receptacle of all the power she was carrying earlier. Mori finishes wasting time and gives Taijin his old eye mask, telling her to take care of it for him. Meanwhile, Mujin has had enough of this trifling crap, and he really hates this baby so much that he keeps on saying that she can't come with him even though this baby doesn't want to join him in the first place. Mujin tries to blast Taijin with his power right in the face, but Mori easily parries it. The villain can't believe Mori just did that, considering that not even Satan was able to redirect his attack. The parried ability shoots off some distance away and causes a tidal wave, so Mori calls his arsenal of dragon staves to form a barricade that protects everyone from the incoming tsunami. He then uses Ice Pick's ability, simply called Ice, to freeze the water and solve this minor problem. Everyone mercifully stops flapping their jaws at each other, and we finally get the moment we've been waiting for. An honest-to-goodness tussle between a fully powered Mori and Mujin, the current god. They waste no time clashing at close range, and we get treated to a nice martial arts sequence where the two warriors find themselves on even footing. Mori shows us that he's really back when he even rescues some random gawker from a stray ice cube coming for his face at the speed of a bullet. Meanwhile, Sujin makes it clear to the readers that Mori and Mujin's clash is happening at an incredible speed. so much so that they start to seem invisible to the naked eye. Meanwhile, Mori and Mujin continue to bring the beat down on each other. They're evenly matched until Mujin catches our hero with a solid palm strike to the chest that pins him to the side of the wall. Mujin twists his hand while still planted on Mori's chest and drives him to the ground below. Mujin goes for some ground and pound, but Mori expertly catches his fist and locks the villain in an inverted armbar before transitioning into what's best described as a bonkers variation of an inverted triangle choke. Mujin brute forces his way out of the submission hold and the two combatants reset. The momentum of the whole fight is broken, however, when Mori starts vomiting blood, which makes Mujin realize that our hero might be at his limit. But Mujin immediately eats his own words when Mori regains composure and causes the whole arena to rumble. Even Mansuk has no idea what the heck's going on in the middle of the battlefield, but he does notice that it's getting harder to breathe in this place. Meanwhile, Mira and Dewi decide to make themselves useful and lead the evacuation of the people hanging around this dangerous place. Eve butts in as usual and unsurprisingly questions our hero's decision to help these innocent people instead of helping out Mori. In turn, Dewi pretty much tells her that this duel between Mori and Mujin is way past the level of something he and Mira could help with. And in a senseless turn of phrase, Dewi calls what's happening to be a quote-unquote moment that'll be remembered more as a myth than a legend. In the meantime, Mori gets ready for another clash, while Mira and Dewi do an exposition dump about the Monkey King's power levels. According to them, Mori was physically at his weakest when he got his power. Dewi then wonders what would happen if the leveling up Mori did as a weakling, aka Mori Dan, carries over to when he's overpowered, aka Mori Jin. Look guys, in not so many words, Dewi's point is that Mori has reached a level of power that's even higher than his previous prime, thanks to all the training he did as Mori Dan. Back to the action, Mori declares that he's finally going to use his signature weapon in this fight, his legs. As a matter of fact, Mori's aura is so strong right now that even Mansuk starts getting the shivers from the PTSD flashback he glimpses of his time fighting Mori all the way back in the God of High School tournament. Back on the battlefield, Mujin tells Mori to come at him and our hero obliges, but Mujin's able to blast him with an invisible strike before he could get close. Mujin then starts running his mouth, telling our hero that sure, Mori might have gotten a strength and speed upgrade right about now. But if it's a contest of raw strength alone, Mujin believes he has the upper hand. Once again, Mujin eats his words when Mori easily recovers from the hit and plants his foot on the ground before busting out a recoilless kick. It doesn't hit Mujin, but he's shocked to find out that Mori just unleashed a kick so hard that it left his footprint on the moon. We are not kidding you here, guys. It turns out that Mori just let out a warning shot to check if unleashing his powers could destroy Renewal Earth. He learns that the planet can take it, so our hero gets ready to go all out in this climactic showdown. In the meantime, Mujin notices Mori's channeling all of Renewal Earth's energy into his foot. Our hero then spews out the first law of thermodynamics, with his point being that he can borrow all this energy at the moment of transfer before declaring that martial arts is actually a form of borrowed power. In turn, Mujin uses an ability called Shine, the Book of the Broken Karmic Cycle in the Last Power, which is a super insane move that makes all his undead monsters literally eat each other. This technique then culminates in Mujin unleashing a technique called Stigma, which the narrator says is the ultimate technique that Mujin used to one-hit KO Satan, the gods of the First Heavenly Realm, and Dewi Han. Basically, Stigma is what happens after the undead monsters eat each other to form even bigger, uglier monsters, which Mujin then sends out to attack Mori. All this grandstanding all amounts to nothing though, because our hero easily dunks on these big beasts. Meanwhile, Ahan keeps on pitching us the idea that this is the birth of a new myth, and things take a turn for the dumber when we see that Mori's battle against Mujin has now left a bunch of footprints the size of entire continents on all the other planets in the star system. Mori then re-emerges in what may very well be his final form, as he and Mujin square up again, while the narrator tells us that this is a battle between the gods. Our saga continues with Mori and Mujin having their stare down, except this time Mori now has a vest on. Ahan hypes up our hero, yelling at him to crush Mujin no matter what and come back to them. Mori replies with a peace sign and a confident okay. At the same time, Mujin gets all chatty and asks Mori what happened to the loop of binding, whether he destroyed it with his own hands or not. Our hero tells his archenemy to shut his mouth, because he doesn't care about all that myth and prophecy garbage that seemingly everyone in this story has been spewing. What Mori wants is one simple thing, to beat Mujin into the ground, because in his own words, this dude just needs a good beating. Our hero even throws some shade and calls Mujin by his government name, Mubong. So Mujin cuts him off and insists that Mori call him Mujin, because he's not going to let the Monkey King ruin his brand. Meanwhile, Manso continues to get PTSD flashbacks from his fight with Mori all those years ago after watching the standoff unfold. Not too far away, Dewi tells Mori that they'll take care of the innocent civilians in the vicinity to let Mori ham it up and go all out in their upcoming matchup. Dewi tells him to not worry about what's next and just focus on kicking Mujin's teeth in, while Mira wishes the Monkey King to grind their arch-nemesis into dust. The random spectators then cheer Mori on, while Q tells the other revived executives to protect all the civilians in the area. Dusik does the same with his underlings. Meanwhile, Mori gets confident and tells his people to watch him crush Mujin with all the power they gave him. And with that, a bead of sweat from a random dude seemingly hangs in midair as Mori and Mujin finally throw hands. Mori opens the clash with a beautiful lariat that sends Mujin flying. Our hero doesn't give his enemy the chance to recover, as he rushes Mujin again and gives him a haymaker that makes his head bounce like a pinball. Mori's level changes, but Mujin tries to counter with his own salvo. So our hero bobs and weaves to close their distance once more, while Mujin summons his Thousand Hands technique. Mori counters with a sidekick and breaks Mujin's Thousand Hands technique. Remember that bead of sweat? Yeah, this clash happens so fast that we see it hit the ground only now. Not a single person has any idea what the heck's going on in the middle of the battlefield, given the absurd pace Mori and Mujin are going at it. Meanwhile, our hero channels more power to beat Mujin without breaking this entire planet. Mujin can only brace himself for Mori's attack, as he desperately blocks and parries our boy's attacks. He doesn't get hit, but all his Thousand Hands have now been destroyed from Mori's latest barrage. Mori continues to channel more power into his body, and Dewi notices that his best friend is on a whole other level. He is not even using his full power right now, and when Dewi notices Mori gearing up for another devastating blow on Mujin, all he can do is tell everyone to brace themselves for impact because it's going to be big. Mori's attack causes a huge explosion that sends Mujin flying high up in the air. Our hero puts some pressure on his arch-nemesis as he teleports right behind Mujin and goes for a roundhouse kick. Mori hits him cleanly on the face as the villain comes falling down from the sky. Mujin lands back on the ground and prepares to defend himself, but our Monkey King is already in front of him about to hit him with a right straight. Mujin blocks it with his arms, but the force of the punch sends them flying through Renewal Earth's crust and into its piping hot core where the floor is lava. They reset, and Mori notices Mujin turning Satan's wings into energy. Mori responds by gathering even more energy in his foot. Mujin creates a ball of dark energy and blasts Mori with it, while our hero summons Gundawon to counter his opponent's salvo. As is usual with God of High School, this insane display of absurd superhuman powers causes the entire city around them to get destroyed. And of course, there's an explosion that comes with it. Mujin's technique culminates in the form of a few giant glowing crosses, but Mori easily dispels it by having Gundawon bind them with its clouds. In an even more absurd turn of events, Mujin and Mori find themselves floating in space. Mujin grabs Mori by the face, and all the while letting out a super corny one-liner about this place being truly stifling before he drives Mori to the side of the moon, just right beside the giant footprint he left there earlier. Mujin then goes on a quick monologue about Tathagata's 6th and 7th weapons, telling Mori that the Supreme God never used it in the past because they were uncontrollable weapons of mass destruction. But since they're in space and no one can hear them scream here, Mujin knows that he can use his full power to destroy our hero. So Mujin summons Tathagata's 6th and 7th weapons, which happen to be a couple of planet-sized pillars that are currently making their way towards him and Mori. But the Monkey King is not impressed with Mujin's performance, and he instead just channels even more power. Mujin does the same. The 6th and 7th weapons begin to crumble when they get near Mori and Mujin. Our hero suddenly notices a tiny fairy emerging from the rubble and wonders what it is. But then the little creature shoots towards Mori before he could get an answer. The Monkey King could barely defend himself when the fairy attacks, forcefully pushing it away so as to dash the surface of the moon. Little does he know that he missed his shot, as the fairy just rushes our hero and hits him hard. Mori braces himself and finds an opening to grab the fairy midair with his bare hands. The fairy's energy causes a bright flare and a loud hiss the moment our hero envelops it in his hand. He opens them and sees the creature seemingly dead, mistaking it for a bug. Mujin then explains that it's actually a fairy, as even more of these little creatures suddenly emerge. The villain then dumps more exposition and tells his enemy that these things are called a planet-destroying fairy colony of the 6th letter. Thankfully, it's a short one, and we get back into the action when the fairy colony attempts to blast Mori with laser beams. In turn, Mori calls forth his arsenal of yois to block the fairy's attack. It's effective, and Mori opens his eyes to see that his staves have transformed into their original forms. On the other end of the battlefield, Mujin recognizes the dragons before he's taken by surprise when a couple of Mori's magical poles attempt to crush him. Meanwhile, all the other dragons bend the knee to Mori and tell him to use them because they haven't gone all out yet. Mori accepts the offer and orders the dragons to wipe out all the enemies in front of him. Mujin, on the other hand, strains to keep himself from turning into a pancake in between the two yois pressing him. He soon finds an opening and uses his bare hands to cleave and quarter these legendary weapons. At the same time, Mori tells the yois of the previous generation to lend him their strength, so the Dragonbone staves perform an ability called Higher Life, which allows our hero to block the barrage of fairy blasts coming for him. But Mujin makes sure Mori can't recover, so he rushes the Monkey King with the Bell of 108 Agonies and whacks him with it. Mujin gets in a few good shots on our hero, but Mori soon finds an opening, firstly breaking the Bell of Agonies with his knee and then gives his arch-enemy a liver shot that almost knocks the wind out of him. But then Mori senses the fairies gearing up for another salvo, so he calls on one of his big hard poles, the 110th Tortoise, and uses it to swat away the fairy swarm with a single swing. It works, but Mujin then spots the 110th Tortoise and decides to blast the powerful staff to break it through a single point. Another laser blast shoots out and hits the 110th Tortoise, causing it to break in two. Meanwhile, spectators in the distance are just currently enjoying the free light show. Back on the battlefield, Mori and Mujin continue to duke it out. Mujin shoots her boy with lasers, but Mori calls a couple of his pulls and they get into it at close range. A huge black dragon suddenly forms in the middle of the battlefield, which is soon revealed as the original form of another one of Mori's staves, 180th Moon Shadow. 180th Moon Shadow lets out an energy blast to deal with the fairies. Things get even more ridiculous as the moon gets destroyed from all this, while Mori and Mujin continue to throw hands. The ensuing blast destroys a few of Mori's Dragonbone staves and scores upon scores of the fairies. Mujin does another exposition dump to explain the specs of these fairies, and we learn that Tathagata didn't use them in the past because they're able to divide infinitely. This means that they're a hassle to round up once you're done using them. Well, Mujin doesn't give a toss about post-fight cleanup, so he just keeps on using these little creatures, ordering them to blast Mori with lasers again. A near incomprehensible light show ensues on the moon, as the fairies unleash their blasts, but none of it hits Mori, because our hero has formed a protective barrier around himself with one of his yois. Mujin blathers on and reveals that Mori is currently using centrifugal force to block the fairy's light and is honestly impressed with his performance. Meanwhile, Mori tells his yoi to just hold out a little longer, but the fairies just keep on putting pressure on our hero. Mujin expresses that he's curious to see how much more Mori's yoi can take. The fairies continue their barrage, and things get so stupidly insane that Mujin notices the space around Mori warping while this is all going down. Mujin wonders if it's just a gravitational wave or if multiple dimensions are overlapping each other. Mori continues to hold out just a little longer until his yoi ultimately snaps. Mujin then states the obvious and says that the magical pole couldn't take any more damage before ordering his fairies and using a technique called single point break. Mori's about to get barraged again when a couple of Monkey King looking figures emerge from a couple of portals right beside our hero. Mujin wonders if they're clones, but immediately backtracks and realizes what they are, but he doesn't tell the audience just yet. The two figures then greet Mori, while our Monkey King prepares another yoi to counter the fairy's blast. Mori swings his yoi, he destroys a random planet in half and the army of fairies at the same time. Mori's unscathed thanks to the two Monkey King-looking entities who have just arrived. Mujin continues his monologue, but Mori cuts him off to do the exposition dump himself. We then see even more of these Monkey King-looking creatures emerge, and they all look like variations of Mori. They all stand next to Mori with a grand total of 9 Monkey Kings that Mujin have to face. Mori then explains that these aren't ordinary clones. These dudes are every single version of what Mori might have become. Long story short, they're Monkey Kings from another dimension, which Mori has summoned using a technique called Jihonda-sung Extreme Duplication. Yep, that happened. Mori then flaps his gums and tells Mujin that he learned he couldn't beat him with sheer quantity alone during their last fight. So this time he brought only the best of the best. Mori goes on to tell Mujin that even though these alternate Monkey Kings are from other dimensions, they share one thing in common. Each and every one of them hates Tathagata. Mori then points his boys to Mujin, tells them that he's Tathagata, and invites his alternate selves to go wild on this villain. Now, before we continue guys, just a heads up that we're going to refer to each of these alternate Monkey Kings based on their looks to avoid any confusion between them and the original Mori. That said, God of High School's next chapter starts with Fire Ape Man Mori telling his fellow Monkey Kings that original Mori's Tathagata is small. Original Mori agrees, but he warns his alternate selves that this Tathagata is strong. Meanwhile, a fairy tries to bite Mujin and suck his blood. He swats it away, and we learn that these critters have a habit of consuming everything they come across. So Mujin tells himself that he has to pick up the pace before these freaky fairies devour him. At the same time, Hunchback Mori expresses his amusement that Tathagata's failed weapon also exists in this dimension. We learn that Hunchback Mori's world was destroyed by these same creatures. Shadow Mori then reveals that his world's Mujin is an absolute gopher that everyone picks on. Yet another alternate Jihonda-san then tells his fellow Monkey Kings that in his world, Dewi was the one who ascended to become Tathagata, while another says that it was Mira who became the Tathagata in their dimension. On the other hand, Black Hair Mori got it good. He reveals that in his native world, he got it on with Mira and ended up marrying the lass. Ape-Man Mori then decides to tell everyone to quit it with the backstory revelations and save the chit-chat for later. Red Ape Mori adds that the 6th letter, aka the fairies, are just the absolute worst. It destroyed his world too. He then calls for a huddle, but we don't get to find out what exactly it is he tells his fellow Monkey Kings, because the story skips forward to just after Red Ape Mori reveals his game plan. We see that Red Hair Mori and Hunchback Mori aren't so sure about Red Ape Mori's plan, but Fire Ape Man Mori insists they try it out. White Hair Mori then asks Original Mori if he's that strong, and our hero says he'll give their play a go. In the meantime, Mujin turns into an extra spicy racist and tells our hero that just one of them is enough to make him sick, so how dare he bring more Monkey Kings to this world. Mujin gets ready to blast the Monkey Kings, while Fat Mori unsurprisingly chows down on a bun and says he just wants to get this nonsense over with and go home. Now, he might be one tubby fella, but as the old saying goes, never count out the fat kid, because Fat Mori easily blocks Mujin's blast with an energy wave of his own. Hunchback Mori comments that it seems they have quite a mixed bag of Monkey Kings here. He then uses an ability called Time Stop to freeze the fairy swarm before blowing them up with a dose of vibration. Meanwhile, Red Hair Mori uses his Yoi for a fiery strike. On the other hand, White Hair Mori summons portals to send the fairies to their death in another dimension. At the same time, Shadow Mori uses what looks like a red coiling fabric to wrap a bunch of fairies inside a sphere and vanish it from existence, while White Hair Mori tells him that the fairies are multiplying faster than they can get rid of them. This is in spite of the fact that each Monkey King on the battlefield is an absolute unit. We also find out that these fairies have reached the Generation X kids not too far away from the battlefield. These fairies eventually met their demise as soon as they took a bite on one of the kids. Meanwhile, 8-Man Mori tells his allies that he's finished analyzing the fairies' movement patterns. He reveals that the fairies aren't moving at random, they're actually divided into units under the control of a few leaders within the swarm. 8-Man Mori comes up with the game plan to take down the fairy leaders to restrict the swarm's movements. Fire 8-Man Mori steps up to the fairies, but the creatures blow his legs off. Still, he manages to grab a handful of these critters in the process. Meanwhile, White Hair Mori and Hunchback Mori think that Fire 8-Man Mori's plan sucks because he'll just end up taking too much damage with what he's doing. But then he shows them that he knows what he's doing when he instantly regenerates all the damage he took with a technique called Immortal Body Infinite Regeneration. Fire 8-Man Mori then tells his pals to give him the coordinates so that he can serve as both the team's bait and tank. Meanwhile, White Hair Mori notices that the fairy swarm is forming new leaders. Not only that, but their movements are becoming more diverse. That's not even the worst, because White Hair Mori turns around to see that the fairies are now evolving into gross insectoid monsters. This whole display reminds each and every Monkey King of Tathagata. We then get another light show when Mujin uses his single point break ability. Red 8 Mori sees this and starts to get worried. Hunchback Mori and all the other Monkey Kings also spot what's happening, especially the part where the single point break beam is headed for what they call a lens, which ends up amplifying the blast. Hunchback Mori immediately jumps into action and tells his allies to get behind him. He uses his time stop ability once more, but it ultimately shatters when hit by the amplified beam from the single point break. White Hair Mori tells everyone to retreat, but it's too late, as Fat Mori sees that not only is the enemy gearing up for another single point break blast, Mujin has even multiplied it. Another insane light show happens, which culminates in a barrage of multiple single point break beams. 8-Man Mori gets the worst of it, as half of his body ends up getting torn apart from the blast when he comes up clutch and protects his fellow Monkey Kings from the attack. 8-Man Mori proves that he's MVP material when he tells the rest of the Monkey Kings to succeed where he failed and build a happy future before biting the dust. Fire 8-Man Mori gets enraged seeing one of their kin die. He steps right in front of the incoming fairy swarm and tells Hunchback Mori to cast his spell on the man. Hunchback Mori obliges and applies his time stop technique on Fire 8-Man Mori, while Shadow Mori forms a giant Shadow Maw that's ready to clamp down on these critters right behind Fire 8-Man Mori. Shadow Mori's Shadow Maw then envelops around Fire 8-Man Mori and the fairies. Shadow Mori says that his Shadow Coil won't be as durable due to its size, while Mujin gives the order to break through it. The Shadow Ball gets blasted, while Shadow Mori uses all his strength to prevent it from breaking. White Hair Mori takes point and tells his teammates to do it, while Mujin thinks he has our heroes checked as he commands the fairies of Tathagata to attack. But the fairies suddenly stop in their tracks, and we find out that Fire 8-Man Mori's gambit has worked, because he has successfully collected the swarm's leaders during the recent concerted maneuver. This allows them to restrict the swarm's movements temporarily, so the Monkey Kings get ready for a counterattack. Fat Mori unleashes a giant ball of energy called Big Bang, and it's so bright that even the spectators on Renewal Earth can see it. They have no clue what's happening in space, only that it's something incredible. Back on the battlefield, Fat Mori, who has now lost all the weight, reemerges after sending the Big Bang toward Mujin with a punch. But the dust settles and they spot Mujin still standing. Hunchback Mori can't help but repeat what everyone already knows. This Tathagata is the worst. White Hair Mori then does some commentary and says that Mujin and Tathagata's chemistry is incredible. Meanwhile, Mujin gets all hyped and tells his enemies to attack him one more time. The Monkey Kings then notice that the fairy swarm has grown even larger, 3 times bigger than its original size to be exact. It turns out that this technique is called high-speed multiplication plus evolution. You might call it dumb, but Fat Mori calls it going too far. A couple of our heroes' alternate selves ask Original Mori if he still needs more time. Somewhere else, some random dude with a laptop tells Beck that the nebula is behaving strangely. Beck checks the dude's findings and is shocked to find out that the anomaly is the size of the Oort cloud, the giant spherical icy shell of comet-like objects surrounding the solar system. Back on the battlefield, White Hair Mori has just confirmed each fairy colony's location and prepares to send the coordinates to his allies. Hunchback Mori then tells the team that he's completed his triple time stop of the New World. Red 8 Mori, on the other hand, has formed a shield around the main planet, while Red Hair Mori fully energizes the nebula. Fire 8 Mori then explicitly says that he has to get back to his original dimension once they're done here, adding that Original Mori and the Tathagata of this world are ridiculous. Original Mori then raises his hand and calls for Gyondamun, except this version of the magical cloud is different. all thanks to the supercharged abilities that the combined might of these heroes have done. It culminates with an ability called Nebula Thunderbolt. God of High School's next chapter begins with a mercifully quick exposition dump where white-haired Mori explains what he and his Monkey King brethren have just done. Look guys, the two main important takeaways here is 1. Hunchback Mori used his time stop ability to freeze everyone on Renewal Earth so they don't get caught up in Gyundoon's Nebula Thunderbolt. And 2. This supercharged version of Gyundoon was created when the Monkey Kings pretty much siphoned off energy from the Orc Cloud. In the present, original Mori does the honors and tells Gyundoon to strike down Mujin with the Nebula Thunderbolt. It's super effective too, because it destroys the entire fairy swarm in the process. Mujin gets hit dead in center, and all the Monkey Kings double down on the barrage by repeating Gyundoon's command to strike over and over. Mujin gets literally shocked, but he's able to go for a last-ditch effort by calling forth the 7th letter. Meanwhile, our heroes continue to put pressure on Mujin, and their attack gets so insanely large that you can see it from the edge of the Milky Way. Back on Renewal Earth, Beck's man tells him that the Orc Cloud is reacting violently, while Mujin continues to get electrocuted by the Nebula Thunderbolt. The dust settles and Mujin looks like he's been toasted to a crisp. But then the villain regenerates along with the 7th letter, which manifests in Mujin's hand as a levitating diamond. Original Mori spots this and tells his allies to run, but Mujin dashes past our hero in the blink of an eye and blasts him. Mujin's attack is so fast that not even the other Monkey Kings could see it. We then get the full reveal that the 7th letter is a weapon simply called Light. Blackhair Mori notes that Mujin, its wielder, is radiating light. They don't know this is happening, but the Monkey Kings know that they shouldn't stay in Mujin's line of sight. Mujin then starts absorbing light from the nearby stars, all the while running his mouth about how he doesn't have to hold back anymore, thanks to Hunchback Mori stopping Renewal Earth's time. Mujin unleashes the energy that light has gathered and we get another ridiculous wave of light that begins destroying everything in its path. In response, the Monkey Kings pull out strands of their hair and use them to conjure their trademark Dehonda-san duplication technique. They all then apply Yebong Chim on themselves to get a much-needed power boost before using their own bodies to block Light's attack. Scores upon scores of Monkey King clones die in the process, while Mujin just keeps on piling on his attack. Hunchback Mori and Shadow Mori tell their teammates that they can't hold out much longer. But Original Mori knows that they've got plenty of time to mount a counterattack. Each Monkey King summons their respective Yois, while Original Mori then calls forth his final Yoi, Ogre, and grabs the big pole with both of his hands. All the other Monkey Kings brace themselves for one final stand. The other Monkey Kings pretty much wish our hero well, as the Light's attack continues to bombard them. They successfully fend it off, but all the other alternate Monkey Kings run out of juice and disappear afterwards. Do they die? Do they go back to their native dimensions? Only Youngji Park knows. What's interesting is what happens before Blackhair Mori disappears, as we find out a couple of things about him. First, it turns out that this version of the Monkey King became a dragon in his native world. But more striking is when Original Mori reveals that this particular Monkey King happens to be a version of Mori Huey. In any case, all the other Monkey Kings disappear after giving our hero an opening to clash with Mujin. Mori busts out his G-Shook technique, while Mujin uses his agonies. There's a typical flash of white light, and the next thing we know, all of Mori's Dragon Bone poles have been wrecked while he and Mujin go at it at close range. Mujin flaps his lips again and expresses how glad he is that he gets to take down Mori as his final mission. But our hero has had enough of his arch-nemesis' mouth, so he punches him in the face and calls him a piece of trash. Mori then starts berating Mujin for all his bullcrap about human centrism while slugging him. As our hero puts it, Mujin's full of it, because the only thing he really wants is revenge. Mujin then prepares to hit Mori with his Longinus ability, all the while expressing his disappointment in our hero for not understanding his motives, which just enrages Mori further. They clash again. There's another explosion, but at least the two warriors have decided to duke it out using martial arts this time around, even if just for a bit. Mori and Mujin trade blows and soon simultaneously whip out each of their respective gambits. Mori uses a technique called Completely Destroyed Yoi, Final Activation, while Mujin goes for Completely Broken 8th Letter, Final Activation. On top of that, they're doing all this while yelling that the other needs a good beating. Their two techniques then clash. Mori breaks Mujin's staff, while Mujin responds by breaking a few of our hero's Yois. Mujin then finds an opening and pokes a hole through Mori's chest with a fragment of the 7th letter's agonies before attempting to finish the job with his Thousand Hands technique. But Mori digs deep and recovers to counter Mujin's 1,000 Hands with a good old-fashioned Re-Taekwondo Homie Gyoli. The 1,000 hands are broken, and the next thing Mujin knows, his head is bouncing around like a pinball after our hero gives him a supersonic two-piece that leaves him frozen in his tracks. Mujin goes for one last-ditch effort and summons the mandala to try and backstab Mori, but our hero calls forth his ogre staff and the two warriors end up parrying each other's attack. Of course, there's another explosion, and this one is so big that it destroys the moon. All of a sudden, Mori senses Mujin going nuts as the villain writhes in agony. Our hero realizes that Tathagata is finally taking over Mujin's body. And just a few moments later, Mujin loses control of his physical form. as Tathagata takes the wheel and says that a new prophet has been born in this world as well, referring to none other than Taijin, Mujin's baby daughter. Mori immediately rushes toward the enemy, but Tathagata summons Mujin's mountain-sized crosses and several moons to subdue our hero before flicking him away with the wave of his finger. Tathagata then rushes to Renewal Earth to literally eat Taijin in order to gather our energy and give himself a buff. Meanwhile, Mori recovers and yells at Mujin to snap out of Tathagata's control, but it doesn't work. Tathagata soon reaches Renewal Earth and tries to grab Taijin from Ahan, but Uma comes up clutch and punches him in the face. Uma knows she can't beat Tathagata alone, especially considering that she lent most of her power to Mori earlier. But unknown to everyone else, even Tathagata knows that he's not at full strength due to all the damage that Mujin's body has taken up till now. Meanwhile, every borrowed power-using human around him does their part and steps up to Mujin, ready to bust out everything they've got to protect one another. Dean even lets out a badass line, as he tells his former boss that he might not be able to see Mujin's future, but he can sure as heck see their own. Not too far away, for the first time in this arc, Eve stops being a liability and does something genuinely useful when she takes point and tells her fellow Generation X friends to use their resonance and transfer all their energy to Dean and Bongram. And as if that's not convenient enough, Dewi reveals that he's good for a scrap, albeit not being at full power. Mira's raring to go too, because we learn that Beck has just finished repairing her arm. She only has 64% of energy right now, but she's more than willing to give Mujin 110% of the business. Mira then uses her robotic arm to activate her Wi-Fi connection, while the rest of our heroes prepare to throw down against the big baddie. At the same time, Tathagata speaks to Mujin and tells him that what's happening right now is karma for all the insidious nonsense he's done up until this point. Mujin has a quick flashback of his deeds, but he ultimately realizes that his fate isn't so bad. But then Tathagata tells him to give him his body, and Mujin immediately succumbs to the Supreme God's influence. Before he can do anything though, a random Generation X kid blasts Tathagata with energy that hits him square in the chin. Tathagata gets super aggressive and tries to give the kid a cracking left overhand to the face, but Mujin is able to take back control of his body for a second to chop off his own arm and save one of his precious creations. Mujin then uses all of his willpower to tell all the Generation X kids to get away from him as far away as possible, but the same one who attacked him decides to chew up the scenery and tug on his pants and tell Mujin to hang in there. The boy then gives Mujin a quick pep talk, telling him that he believes in him. It doesn't work, and Tathagata takes over again to try and eat Mujin's baby. He almost takes a bite out of Taijin, but the Supreme God is suddenly hit by a nebula thunderbolt. Mori arrives just in time to tell the Supreme God that they've still got a debt to settle. In the meantime, Mujin starts having another flashback, this time of Taijin and Mansuk, which allows him to take control of his body yet again, as he attacks Mori while screaming that his name means inexhaustible and limitless. Mori kicks him on the side of the head and gives Mujin a super exact calculation of how many times he needs to be reborn before he gets any sympathy, namely 110,008,400 times. At the same time, Tathagata tries to lure Mujin into giving him his body. We then get a mercifully succinct sequence where Mujin and Tathagata come face to face in their inner world. Tathagata then blathers on about all this prophecy nonsense once again, with his main point being that his union with Mujin would mean that they'll achieve a true union between mankind and the gods. In the real world, Mujin gets nuts once again and starts lashing out violently due to Tathagata's influence. Mujin keeps on fighting the Supreme God. Things take a super disgusting turn when Tathagata literally bursts out of Mujin's back. Mori realizes that the fragment of Tathagata inside Mujin's body is eating away at him, while Mujin decides to blast himself through the chest to prevent Tathagata's body from emerging from his back. It does nothing, because the Supreme God ends up taking over Mujin once again. He greets Mori and slobbers all over the idea that he'll get to eat a real prophet this time. Mori hears this and is totally grossed out, as he tries to tell Mujin that he shouldn't eat his own daughter. Tathagata then replies by pretty much throwing the question back at Mori, as he pretty much says if the Monkey King could eat Wanzang, then why the hell can't he eat a baby? Mujin's will tries to fight against the Supreme God's control one more time, but all this does is allow Tathagata to shoot out parts of his disgusting flesh out of Mujin's back. These fleshy tendrils then extend throughout the ruined city and soon transform into more versions of the Supreme God. Tathagata then tells his tendril clones to hunt down and eat the prophet's flesh, aka Taijin. And as an afterthought, he tells his clones to just gobble up everything in their path too. Chaos ensues as the tendril clones start absorbing everyone and everything they come across. Thankfully, Bongram arrives just in time to save these random citizens. Dean tells everyone to get to higher ground because these filthy flesh tendrils are dangerous even if it only grazes you. Meanwhile, Tathagata's tendril clones spot Bongram and Dean, and they start to wonder if they're the prophet that the original Tathagata is talking about. They realize that they're not, but ultimately decide to eat them anyway. Not too far away, Mori notices that Tathagata is fusing with everything he touches. The tendrils then coil around each other until they form a giant version of the Supreme God. Mori hops on Gyundoon and squares up to Tathagata. The Supreme God charges energy through his mouth, and our hero blocks it with his Yoi. Mori then realizes that Tathagata is trying to eat the entire world before spinning his pole to create a tornado that would counter the Supreme God's upcoming salvo. Tathagata unleashes another energy burst from his mouth, and Mori blocks it once more with Yoi. This happens one more time until the Monkey King finds an opening and socks Tathagata right in the face. Mori even throws some shade at the guy, telling the Supreme God that Mujin was much harder to deal with. Still, our hero wonders if his sworn enemy was really eaten by this scumbag god. Tathagata's gross flesh continues to eat away everything in its path, but then it suddenly stops and we see the Supreme God looking like he's been lobotomized. Well, that's because he just got a chunk of his brains chewed off by none other than Mujin. See, Mujin has re-emerged, and the first thing he does is put this god in his place. He even reminds Tathagata how much he hates gods, especially the bald ones, while chowing down on some god meat. And this time, Mujin has taken back control of his body, especially when he tells the Supreme God to stop messing with his new humanity. The dude even insults Tathagata by calling him a minor god. Mujin then pretty much puts Tathagata in his place and tells the Supreme God to just do what he tells him to because he's the one in control here. Oh, and just to be clear, Mujin's not done eating. So he shoves his right arm inside Tathagata's skull and helps himself to more of that delicious god meat. The brain damage causes Tathagata to check out, destroying his tendrils' hold on the planet. And with Mujin now back at the wheel, he adds insult to Tathagata's injuries by telling the fallen god that he's going to make good use of his power. Mujin then pulls out all of Tathagata's tendrils, saving everyone from getting absorbed. But make no mistake, Mujin hasn't suddenly done a face turn. In fact, the first thing he does is square up to Mori and tell him that he hates gods, so he hates Mori too. Mori laughs his ass off after hearing this as it makes him want to acknowledge his arch-nemesis. Once again, Mori calls him by his government name, Mubong, prompting the villain to insist that he call him Mujin. Mujin goes on another spiel about the meaning of Mujin, and at this point, even Mori has grown weary of this exceedingly asinine beef going on between them, so he just invites Mujin to end this fight. On the bright side, our hero does finally agree to call him Mujin. Not too far away, Eihan is so absorbed by the fight going on between her brother and Mujin that she fails to notice a clump of Tathagata's flesh slithering towards her and Taijin. Mujin and Mori don't get their fight over with just yet though, because we get another flashback to just a few seconds before Mujin took full control of Tathagata's powers and awakened as a bona fide god. In his mind, aka Mujin's own inner world, we learn that he and Tathagata got into a quick scuffle in the nude to determine who gets to eat who. Mujin's will wins in the end when he grabs Tathagata by his earring loops and pretty much screams in his face that he'll make a world ruled by humans and nothing can stop him. Tathagata tries to take a bite out of Mujin and make him surrender his body, but Mujin continues to struggle against him. In the real world, Mori notices Mujin going nuts again and realizes he still can't fully control the Supreme God. All of a sudden, Mori finds himself roped into Mujin's inner world. Mujin apologizes to our hero for killing his grandpa Taijin and explains that he had to use lies and betrayal to get what he wanted because he was a weakling. To put it simply, Mujin thought he had no choice. In a way, Mujin sort of gaslights Mori and asks our hero if things would have turned out differently if Mori had helped him to achieve his goals in the first place. On top of that, Mujin wonders if he and Mori would have had a much different kind of relationship if Mujin himself had a teacher like Wanzang. But Mujin answers his own question and says, no, things would have been the same. Then he goes on one of his usual bonkers rants about how he despises gods and how he wants to make humanity the strongest. Mujin concludes that results are everything, and promises to try again until he gets what he wants. This goes on for a while, and Mujin gets flashbacks about his fallen friends along the way. But the plot thankfully moves forward when we see that Mujin has finally beaten Tathagata in his inner world and starts eating the scumbag god by the throat. Mori sees this and states the obvious, that Mujin is actually eating a literal god, and you know this bald jerk is about to bite the dust when he gets a flashback of his motivations for being such a scummy villain. The long and short of it is that Tathagata only wanted to grasp the truth of the universe, which is reason enough for him to be the insufferable piece of garbage that he is. In any case, Tathagata finally accepts defeat and surrenders his body to Mujin, even wishing him success along the way. And apparently eating Tathagata doesn't just give you his powers, it gives you the power of all the countless gods and demon kings that Tathagata has devoured in the past, as well as the truth of the universe. In the present, Mujin finally finishes chowing down on the Supreme God. He transforms into a god himself and squares up to Mori just as we saw earlier. Thankfully, these two warriors decide to stop all the trash talk and just put hands on each other shortly after facing off. Mujin opens the clash and seemingly damages Mori's hands. Mori counters with a thunderbolt, but Mujin meets it with his longinus ability. The fight gets intense and the Ord Cloud breaks apart. Mori realizes that Mujin has finally completely absorbed Tathagata's power and starts to feel the pressure creeping up all over him. On the ground, Eihan and Mujin's baby are about to get eaten by a leftover clump of Tathagata's gross flesh clone, but Mujin stops it and instead takes control of the creature. Mujin turns it into a disgusting giant Tathagata baby that's even uglier than Taijin. The baby monster then starts wreaking havoc, stomping on everything and shooting energy blasts from its mouth. Mujin then starts riding his baby monster and declares that he's basically going to start everything over from the very beginning. He then uses his powers to engulf his Generation X kids inside egg-shaped prisons with wings made of the Supreme God's flesh. Mori thinks Mujin has gone so nuts that he's going to kill his favorite pet project, but the villain assures him that he's only keeping these kids safe while he commits another genocide against old humanity. Plus, Mujin says that he plans on fusing these Generation X kids with Tathagata's flesh to pretty much speed up his planned evolution of humanity. Mujin then proceeds to summon thousands of laser spears above the skies and shoot it towards all the humans on the ground. In turn, Mori calls forth his dragon armor suits to protect these unwitting citizens. Mujin spots this, so he ups the ante and summons even more sky spears. And just to be sure these fools die, Mujin literally summons the sun and prepares to drop it down on everyone on the ground. Mujin declares that by eradicating these so-called cockroaches, he can finally restart the solar system's history. He then declares that this is the end. Mujin's not done preparing his ridiculous gambit either, because the next thing he does is summon a trio of blue giants, all the while repeating his promise to restart the solar system's history. People on Renewal Earth can see the solar system-ending sun swirling in the sky, and it doesn't take long before one of the blue giants destroys a nearby moon. The sheer heat coming from these stars obliterates large sections of the central area of Renewal Earth, from the medical center to the New World Central. Mori then gets up to speed that the blue giants aren't even 30% of the way through, and it's already wreaking havoc all over the place. As our hero puts it, if even one of the giants makes it all the way through, its gravity alone will spell the end of the solar system, and the world is obviously going to end. The blue giants get closer to Renewal Earth, and people start to burn alive from the sheer heat of these stars. Mujin tells Mori that there's no way he could stop the blue giants even if he beats them in battle. Back on the ground, Ahan tries to use her ice powers to stave off the blue giant's heat and only now realizes that Mujin has abandoned his baby. Meanwhile, Dean and Bongram have just finished destroying the last remaining fragments of Tathagata on the ground, so he tells his partner that they should start saving the Generation X kids trapped inside the flesh eggs. A few other random borrowed power users try to help out Mori by attacking Mujin, but they instantly get toasted when they try to make a move. Meanwhile, Sujin gets her act together and uses her Armor of Pandora to channel her Pandora, the Hope technique, and prevent everyone in the area from succumbing to the blue giant's heat. She then calls for Mori to finish his job because she can't hold out for long. At the same time, Uma uses her Pancho to do her part in staving off the blue giant's effect. Mori thanks his allies and says he can focus on attacking Mujin now. Our hero shoots the trio of blue giants with a Nebula Thunderbolt. It's not super effective because it only destroys one of the suns. Mori realizes that even the Nebula Thunderbolt can only barely wreck a single blue giant, and in his own words, tells himself that this is his limit without the help of this world's Monkey King. Mujin then appears right behind our hero and slits open the side of his neck. Mori's forced to fall back and stop the bleeding, while Mujin hops on his baby monster and attempts to crush our hero. Meanwhile, Wanzang's ghost suddenly appears beside Mori and talks to the boy about how a paradise built on sacrifice is a lie, but peace built on everyone's peace is true paradise. This makes Mori realize what he has to do, so he apologizes to Ahan as he activates Yebong Chim. We then get a quick exposition dump from the narrator explaining what we already know, that Mori's body can't take another dose of Yebong Chim and he might die once its rebound takes effect. However, Dewi jumps in before Mori could pull off his Yebong Chim. Dewi punches the baby monster's fist to drive it away and tells his best friend to get up. Mira arrives on the scene too and tells Mori that she and Dewi will create an opening for our hero to strike their archenemy. Mira tells Mori to go all out, to his heart's content, and our hero gets ready to lunge at Mujin. Mori then summons his Ogre Yoi and tells the ancient dragon that he's about to show her the complete form of his G-Shock ability. Mori grabs his large pole with two hands and spins it to prepare G-Shock. Meanwhile, Mira tells her husband to just hang in there while Mori prepares his ultimate move. She can notice that just bearing the weight of Mori's Yoi is putting a burden on her body, but Mira perseveres and uses a technique called Wi-Fi Road to create a path for the upcoming G-Shock. On the other hand, Dewi adds more spin to the staff with his Sage's Wisdom Electromagnetic Force ability. On the ground, Ilpio tells everyone to hurry because if his suspicions are correct, the prophecy has not been fulfilled yet. One of his agents tells him that the equipment is ready, but it will be reduced to ashes at this rate and supplying electric power is impossible, which ultimately means they can't carry out their plan. At the same time, Dean uses his resonance to back up his allies, while the trapped Generation X kids, like Eve, remain unconscious. A moment later, Dean and Bongram are able to use the resonance to communicate with the trapped kids. Back on the battlefield, Mori finally unleashes G-Shock, and it culminates in a blast as the magical staff shoots towards Mujin. The villain sees the Yoi coming for him, so he uses his baby monster to block it with its gigantic hand. Mujin then starts to tremble. All the while, Mori has a flashback to the time Odin told him to keep watching Mujin's movements to find a weakness. And we get the reveal that our hero's arch-enemy's weakness lies in repetitive attacks instead of complex ones. This all stems from the fact that there's no way a human and a god like Tathagata can fuse together that easily. In the present, the Jishok is just about to hit the baby monster's hand when Mujin's arm suddenly starts to mutate. Dewi and Mira yell for Mori that now is the time, so Mori shrinks his Yoi, causing it to act like a needle that bursts the baby monster's arm. Yoi then shoots past Mujin, and the villain realizes that Mori wasn't aiming for him all along. He was gunning for the blue giant right behind him. The Jishok hits the blue giant, but Mori notices that it's not enough to pierce through the other side. But Ogre conveniently uses her own power to augment the Jishok as a reward for entertaining her. The Yoi pierces through the blue giant and destroys it, leaving only one son under Mujin's command at this point. Mori wastes no time getting back into the fray, and Mira and Dewi even slaps him on the back for a bit of a boost. His best friends tell him to focus and win as they both fall to the ground. Mori shouts that it's a given. While this is happening, Mujin fuses some of his broken weapons with his broken 8th letter to create an entirely new weapon. He compressed the broken weapons using the radiance of the blue giant. This ends up becoming the trampled rusty fallen blade, which he uses to try and slash Mori up when they clash yet again, telling our hero that it's time for them to settle things now. God of High School's next chapter begins with another super on-brand flashback, this time reiterating Yura's encounter with the world government astronaut from earlier. It's here that we learn the identity of this astronaut, who is none other than Sunga Park, Ilpio's wife. Here she states that she needs Yura to show the situation they are in by handing her a videotape to play on her livestream. In the present, Bongram tells Dean that she knows he saw the future again, namely the last of the 3 signs of the prophecy, the rain of blood. Dean admits it and says that it will happen soon. Back on the battlefield, Mujin gets the better of Mori during their latest clash and carves up our hero with his trampled rusty fallen blade. Still, our hero keeps on getting back up and Mujin even commends him for his toughness. Mujin then finds an opening and stabs Mori in the gut, and the trampled rusty fallen blade is such a problem that it causes an explosion behind Mori, of course. Back on the ground, Ilpio tells everyone to proceed with their electrical discharge, which allows Yura to start her live stream. Yura then does a quick speech before playing the same videotape the astronaut gave her, and we learn that it contains raw footage of that time Mujin killed Jin Taijin and betrayed the rest of our heroes 17 years ago, exposing him as a fraud. Yura then asks everyone who's watching her livestream to lend their power to Mori, even if just letting our Monkey King know that they are rooting for him. It may sound ridiculous to the people. Nothing is useless and even the tiniest help is worth a try. Meanwhile, Mori notices that the last remaining blue giant has already crossed over 80% of the way. Yura continues to urge everyone watching to lend their powers until Dean cuts into the stream and informs everyone that all their borrowed powers, skills, and strength are going to disappear as soon as they lend Mori their power. We then get a mercifully quick exposition dump detailing how this power transference is going to work. The main gist of it is that Ilpio and Beck are going to use Mira's robotic Wi-Fi arm to collect the borrowed power from everyone willing to lend it. Then they're going to use Generation X's resonance to transfer it and finally send it to the same artifact embedded in Mori's chest, the same pendant that Mujin gave his daughter before. Everyone hears Yura's plea and ultimately agrees to surrender their borrowed powers to Mori. Mira begins collecting them, and even Uma and her loyal Oxymen subjects volunteer to lend Mori their strength. Back on the battlefield, it does seemingly rain blood, which fulfills the last part of the prophecy. But Mori ultimately realizes that this isn't blood, this is borrowed power. Mujin then pieces the puzzle together and realizes how the prophecy has been fulfilled. The first sign, the mark of the beast, happens to be Mira and Wi-Fi. The second part of the prophecy, on the other hand, the new son of man, refers to Dean and all of Generation X. Finally, there's the rain of blood, which we already established is what's happening right now, the collective borrowed power of everyone raining down on Mori to transfer to him. Mori then tells Mujin to look at what's happening, because this is everything he turned his back on. Our hero then repeats Heel's motto, and tells his archenemy that nothing's useless. Heel even makes a quick cameo to say the same thing. All of a sudden, another Yoi magically forms in front of Mori, and we soon learn that it's made both from the borrowed power of his friends along with the national treasures that they've given up to help our hero in this final duel. This all culminates in the creation of what may very well be Mori's biggest, hardest, and strongest weapon called the Final Yoi. Mori grabs the Final Yoi by its shaft, and we see that all the borrowed powers that everyone gave up are entering it. Mori in turn grows wings. In the meantime, our hero continues to get charged up, while the ghosts of the Six and even Jagal Tech give him a pep talk. The narrator sells this development hard too, and tells us that this is the first and last time that humans have lent a god their power. Meanwhile, Mori's grandpa Taijin's ghost appears beside him and commends him for making a bunch of good friends. Wanzang's ghost appears as well, and tells our hero that he's really grown up now. Mori then thanks everyone for helping him and declares that this is the end of the great karmic cycle as he understands it. At the same time, Mujin screams Mori's name, while our hero uses his power to literally fix the entire Reno Earth planet. This makes Mujin realize that Mori's actually the god of prophecy, not him. But as the villain puts it, it doesn't matter. It's just one more reason for Mujin to have to kill Mori. We then get another narration revealing more details about this insane prophecy where it's established that the Almighty God shall lead his legions of demons to this earth, which is none other than Mori. The prophet Masa is Taijin, Mujin's baby daughter. And finally, the prophet shall offer himself as a sacrifice to the Almighty God for the sake of their sins, which happened when Taijin transferred her gathered energy to Mori earlier in the story. Everyone spots Mori's wings, and the narrator dictates that these are the same crimson wings that the prophecy was talking about too. The one the Almighty God would have to bring a new son of man and a new wind with him. Back on the ground, everyone says goodbye to their borrowed powers as they hand it over to Mori. This encapsulates a perfect balance among gods, mankind, and monsters. The narrator then blathers on about how this is our hero's first and final power called Yoban, as Mori prepares to throw hands with Mujin one last time. By this point, the last remaining blue giant has already crossed over 99.99% of the way. In the meantime, Mori rushes towards Mujin while reminiscing about his past, which ultimately leads our hero to conclude that yes, Wanzang was right. Buddha is inside everybody. Mori then declares that everyone's feelings are the strongest, while the narrator gives the first and last power lent to a god by humans a name, Nirvana. Down on the ground, people have started worshipping Mori as a bona fide god, while Dewi doesn't entirely agree. To both him and Mira, this isn't God, not Tathagata either. This is Mori Jin, their knucklehead friend. Mujin and Mori finally go for their climactic clash, but the momentum is broken when the narrator does an exposition dump on the origins of our two combatants. In one corner, there's Mujin, a god who was born human. He was betrayed by the gods and tried to bring them down until he became a god himself one day. In the other corner is Mori. He was once a god and used to be the strongest one of them all. Like Mujin, he too was betrayed by the gods and fell to earth where he became human. Weaker than he had ever been before and carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, the narrator says that Mori began to silently walk forward. On the other hand, Mujin, who was determined to bring down the gods, chose the path that would leave him friendless for the sake of his goal. Both being extraordinary origin stories that contain overflowing potential, an insurmountable wall, and the first taste of despair, pertaining to Mori's defeat at the hands of Tathagata thousands of years ago, and Mujin getting dunked on by Jin Taijin back when he was still doing martial arts. The narrator continues to dump exposition and move on to the part where both Mujin and Mori met their respective friend, teacher, or some would say a prophet. Mori had Wanzang, while Mujin had Mansuk and Mandak. Both Mujin and Mori would form a relationship with these people until the gods betrayed them, since these scumbags wanted the prophet's power. For Mori, it was Tathagata. For Mujin, it was Beelzebub. And then, this is where these two dudes' paths diverged. Whereas Wanzang wished for Mori to trust humans and Mansuk pretty much embedded the idea to hate humans in Mujin. Their paths diverged further when Taijin told Mori to make lots of friends, while Aura reinforced Mujin's belief about hating humanity and despising the gods. The narrator then keeps on blathering about how their paths diverged and then eventually crossed. But at this point, Mori already had many friends who helped him carry his cross, while Mujin left behind everything and was alone. In the narrator's own words, these two gods that were alike and yet not alike crossed paths. We finally go back to the present to get some of that much-needed payoff as Mori and Mujin clash into each other, while the narrator commentates on how these two gods fought like mad. In the meantime, Mujin and Mori get into it at close range, but they soon reset and Mujin starts getting all insecure that everybody's praying to our hero. Mujin insists that Mori is just a god that these people made up before even getting more enraged and pretty much telling Mori to just die along with the rest of the solar system. The blue giant then finally reaches Renewal Earth and threatens to engulf it. But Mori raises his hand and tells it to go back to where it came from. Magical spirit hands then guide the blue giant away from Renewal Earth and, well, back to where it came from. Mujin spots this and can't believe Mori has completely defied the order of things. To put it simply, the Monkey King now has the power to create and regenerate matter. Mori uses his newfound godly powers to reconstruct all the planets that were destroyed in this bonkers war, while bringing life back to Renewal Earth. He does this using a technique called karma, which gives our hero power over nature. Mujin then gets cheeky and teleports behind Mori to run him through with his sword, throwing some shade at our hero when he tells him that he has a weak finish. But Mori just eats it up and raises his palm right in front of Mujin's face. Mori's godly aura is too powerful for Mujin as he realizes that our Monkey King is now the real deal, being the Lord of God. Tathagata then starts crying as the Supreme God kneels and devotes himself to Mori. In fact, Mujin gets reminded of the time he got humiliated by Taijin, and this time it's Taijin's grandson dominating him. Mori's aura gets so strong that it makes Mujin want to kneel and worship, to put his hands together and pray. Thankfully, Mujin doesn't wuss out and instead breaks free of Mori's influence, as he yells at his enemy to shut up. Mori tells him to disappear and Mujin starts disintegrating. But Mujin proves that he's a suitable final boss for this insane saga when he manages to reject Mori's karma ability. Mujin then starts growing red wings similar to Mori's, which makes our hero realize that Mujin has someone precious to him too. Meanwhile, Mujin feels all cozy and warm while the red wings form on his back. On the other hand, Mori notes that Mujin's wings are the reason he could reject his karma ability. At the same time, Mujin feels that his body is at its limit, which he can easily tell by the fact that it's still disintegrating right before their very eyes. Mori tells him to give up because there's no coming back from this. But curiously, the blade of Tathagata appears right in front of Mujin. Mujin realizes that the blade of Tathagata switched sides and came to him because Mira has already used up all her energy. Mujin then has a quick flashback to when he was a kid who felt like the whole world was in his palms. In the present, Mujin goes even more insane and starts talking to his swords, thinking that they're telling him to keep moving forward. Mujin then prepares for one final gambit, as he basically tells Mori he doesn't give a crap if he's the god of all gods. To Mujin, he's just a target, because killing off all the gods is his sworn duty. Mujin then combines his rusty fallen blade and the broken blade of Tathagata to create the one holy spear. Mujin prepares to hack away at Mori, while our hero starts to wonder if things would have been different between them if Mujin had someone like Wan Zhang or Jin Taijin. He doesn't bother to answer the question though, and instead prepares to meet Mujin head-on. The narrator then gives us another repeat lowdown, which might be one of the last we'll ever hear this part. There once were two gods. The two gods were alike and yet not alike. They met different people and walked different paths. Then they crossed paths and fought like mad. In the end, and the narration ends there. Back to the action. Mori and Mujin's clash destroys each of their weapons. Our hero gets the better of Mujin because now his arm is breaking off. On the other side, Mori thanks his final Yoi, which is now apparently given the name Samsara, for blocking the Holy Spear and protecting him. At this point, Mujin has had enough of these zany weapons, so he decides to take out Mori the old-fashioned way, with a single blow using what remains of his life. Mori figures that Mujin is ready to put his life on the line and die today, as his arch-nemesis channels his malice ability. Mori then responds by pulling off the perfect form of his trademark technique, but not before having a flashback where we see Taijin teaching him to form the most perfect circle to pull it off. The narrator then explains that Mori has now completed his ultimate technique, and it all culminates in a move called Mori Jin Original Extreme Version, Jin Hui Chuk Perfect Circle. Mori does a roundhouse kick that's so perfect, it really forms a perfect circle and flatlines Mujin, effectively dispelling his malice technique. People on Renewal Earth then get a light show when they see Mori's extreme version Hui Chuk forming a lotus flower made of light the size of an entire constellation. To add insult to injury, Mujin even realizes that Mori wasn't aiming his Hui Chuk at him. Our dude was leveled up to such a ridiculous degree that he targeted the entire universe to purify it. That's right, Mori literally kicked the universe so hard that it got rid of all its impurities. Mujin can feel the life seeping out of him after taking the brunt of Mori's technique. His body starts to disintegrate further, and of course he has a flashback along the way. His flashback allows him to remind himself that Mujin means limitless and inexhaustible. In the present, Mujin uses every ounce of his remaining strength to still put hands on Mori, repeating that his name is Mujin and that it means limitless and inexhaustible. Meanwhile, the narrator repeats the line that these two gods fought like mad, but at least we get new information this time when it also says that Mori and Mujin ended up becoming the world. But then we get another flashback where Mujin pretty much sees all the people he failed, with P and Mansuk among them. Mujin then starts taking a trip down memory lane, starting at a time when he thought he was the best there is at what he does. That is until he and the Six got absolutely humiliated by Taijin. Mujin recalls that this was the moment he realized that all of his talent meant nothing. This ultimately turned him into the scumbag he is today, a person willing to use the people around him again and again until he gets what he wants. As Mujin puts it, he didn't have time to make friends. And in a moment of pure clarity, Mujin admits that his methods were the only way for a weakling like him to stand up to someone stronger. You've got to applaud him too, because Mujin might be a grade A scumbag, but he was one willing to use whatever means necessary to achieve his goals. The problem is that Mujin now knows that all his efforts have been useless. He admits he failed, especially when he recalls people like P, Mansuk, and R, each an important person in his life who he failed to save. In the present, Mujin wakes up and is puzzled that he's still alive after witnessing himself disintegrate in real time. Mori walks up to him and asks him if he's up. Mujin gets back on his feet and squares up to our hero. Instead of duking it out right then and there though, Mujin tells Mori that he failed. Mori piles on and says yeah, he lost. This makes the villain wonder if all his efforts have been meaningless, but he immediately regains his composure, almost as if on instinct, and prepares to hit Mori with a punch. But our hero beats him to it and sends Mujin flying before he could even raise his fist. Mori tells Mujin that he's not going to go easy on him, that he should quit if he's not prepared to give it his all. So Mujin gets back up again only to get a beating from his arch-nemesis. Mujin is sent flying again and realizes that he's been resurrected only temporarily. He figures that he has 10 minutes tops before his body completely gives out, while Mori asks him if he's ready to throw in the towel. Meanwhile, Mujin starts to entertain the idea of just putting it all down and finding peace. He thinks it might not be so bad, but he really can't help himself. In fact, even Mujin doesn't know why he keeps acting like an absolute legend, as he keeps on getting back up to fight in spite of the fact that he has already cast everything aside and lost. Mujin tells Mori to come, and they get into another clash. All the while, Mujin continues to ask himself why he can't give up. He then sees a vision of Mandok, Mansuk, and P's corpses lying face flat on the ground behind him, and ultimately concludes that he's doing all this to honor their memory. Mujin realizes that back then, it was those three that saved him and fixed him up from disappearing. Mujin walks up to Mori again, while our hero tells him that he's the one who set up everything to fulfill the prophecy, namely the Wi-Fi, aka the sign of the beast, Generation X, aka the son of man, and the rain of blood that happened earlier, which was actually borrowed power. Mori surmises that all this mumbo-jumbo might even reveal that the so-called savior from the prophecy is none other than Mujin himself. This entire heart-to-heart makes Mujin realize the same lesson that Mori learned from Heel, that nothing is useless. On top of that, it dawns on Mujin that he was never alone, because he had people who actually cared for him, such as Mansuk, Mandok, and P. Mujin then looks around and finally realizes where he and Mori are. Mori then reveals that Taijin, his daughter, teleported them here during their recent clash in space. At this point, Mujin gets his confidence back, so he tells Mori to shut his mouth, as he magically crafts his trademark Hawaiian shirt and gets ready to tussle with our hero for the umpteenth time. Before starting though, Mori asks him if he's really sure about using the last of his godly powers in this silly duel, to which Mujin replies with the same words, "Shut up." As he puts it, it doesn't matter whether or not he has the power to do it, Mujin is going to kill off the gods. Mujin then repeats the meaning of his name and challenges Mori to give him everything he's got and he'll tear it all to shreds. Our hero is loving this energy, so he welcomes it. And if he thought that this long drawn-out fight wasn't ridiculous enough, we get the reveal that Taijin actually transported these two combatants to the old world, all the way down to the bottom of the ruined Coax facility, the same arena where the original God of High School tournament was held. And now the two warriors declare that they're about to start the final God of High School tournament. Mori and Mujin square up to each other one last time. Mujin says that this whole place, the earth, and his own body will crumble soon. They have 5 minutes at most to settle their score. At the same time, Mori knows he's already won this battle and wonders why Mujin still keeps on stirring things up. Both warriors become resolute in bringing the other down for good, as Mori and Mujin meet in the middle. They get into it at close range, with Mori smashing Mujin in the side of the face with a beautiful right overhand. At this point, both of them know that they need to get one more blow against each other. Their duel ramps up as the warriors' movements reach supersonic speeds. Their hits don't land and instead crash into the already crumbling walls of the old arena. Mujin then finds an opening and goes for a slicing open palm strike that nicks Mori in the ear. But our hero immediately changes levels and gears up for a counter kick. It nicks the left side of Mujin's face, and then Mori manages to transition to another superb hook kick that flattens Mujin's face. The villain is knocked down. Mori tries to deliver the killing blow by caving in Mujin's chest with a powerful stomp, but he rolls out of trouble. The two rivals reset, and Mujin knows that this is purely a contest of martial arts, but he's also well aware that there's a huge difference in their current energy levels right now, which allows Mori to bust his chin with another strike. Mujin gains a bit of distance from his opponent, but Mori puts more pressure on him as he goes for a flying knee. Mujin blocks it with his elbow, and these two warriors start trading blows after that. Mori soon catches Mujin with another kick that lands square on his face. In reply, Mujin lunges at Mori and swipes away at him, but our hero ducks. And while their final duel rages on, Mujin starts seeing the ghosts of his long-dead friends and loved ones. Mujin realizes that death is staring at him, just waiting to take him away. And soon enough, Mujin's body starts to crack and crumble. Still, you can't help but be impressed with his resolve, as he refuses to flatline and instead tells himself he's not done yet. Mujin prepares his stance and gets into another clash with Mori. He unsurprisingly gets wailed on, but Mujin keeps on telling himself that he's never going to stop. The narrator tells us that Mujin just kept on getting back up and resetting their clash for an extended period of time that it almost looked like he was being punished from the beating that Mori was giving him. Eventually, Mori asks his archenemy if he's done, but Mori sees the fire in Mujin's eyes, so he continues bringing the beatdown on him. Mori wonders what exactly it is that Mujin wants. Meanwhile, Mujin tells his opponent that he has nothing to apologize for. Mori tells Mujin that he doesn't want his apology, as he reveals that his hatred and loathing have disappeared long ago. Now there is only emptiness. Mori continues pummeling Mujin, who keeps questioning himself about why he keeps on fighting. He only stops when the spirits of the dead literally catch up to him and attempt to pull him to the underworld. Mujin wonders if it's now time for him to rest. But this is Mujin we're talking about, so he bursts through the spirits of the dead and tells himself that he's not done yet. And you really gotta give the man some credit, because he uses every last bit of his strength to lunge at Mori in spite of the fact that he knows he's just one man in front of the gods. Mujin can feel the souls of his loved ones pushing him to give it everything he's got, and Mujin succinctly gives us the answer as to why he keeps on fighting, because this is his calling in life. Mujin tries to drive his hand right in Mori's face, but our hero knows that his rival is about to run out of juice. So Mori casually dodges Mujin's attack and puts the man out of his misery with a recoilless kick. Mujin is hit and he finally accepts defeat, telling Mori that they've gone so far from where they started. Mujin then has a quick flashback of his entire relationship with Mori, And instead of going for one more strike, Mugen cradles Mori's face with one hand and tells him that Taijin really did create something interesting. Mugen then tells Mori that he really is one interesting kid, as his body finally gives out. He stumbles forward to give Mori one last hug and whispers something in his ear, something unintelligible to us readers. Mugen finally disintegrates and dies, with the sad realization that he never beat Mori even once. Mugen's body completely disappears and, as if on cue, the entire ruined arena starts to collapse. Mori stands there and addresses Gaia, telling her that she had it rough too. Our hero then says he's all out of steam and he might not be able to escape this crumbling underground arena. Mori really wants to get back to his friends and loved ones, but he's just tuckered out. So he apologizes to Ahan for needing more time to reunite with her. But then Ahan suddenly appears right behind Mori and berates her brother for not even trying to make his escape. We learn that Ahan used Taijin's power to leap through space that would lead her here. Mori starts to get worried for themselves, especially considering that Ahan brought a literal baby to this crumbling hellhole. In response, Ahan tells him that they're going back together no matter what. Mori wants to scold his sister, but he ends up realizing how much of an MVP Ahan is, so he hugs and thanks her instead. They have a super tender moment, but it's interrupted when all the rest of Mori's friends, from Ilpio to Dewi to Mira to Sujin, tell them to save the touching reunion for later and hurry up because the gate won't hold for much longer. Seeing his pals makes Mori realize that they've achieved the paradise Wan Zhang was talking about, the one built on the happiness of everyone. Mori is humbled that he's still learning from his old love even to this day. He then calls Gunduin and they all hop on the magic cloud to reach the wormhole just as the old world explodes. Things go black and the next thing we see is Mugen sitting on a park bench in the middle of empty space. He suddenly hears a voice inviting him to come with them. So he follows it, but not before turning his head to see Ahan and his baby walking towards the other direction. Mugen wishes Taijin happiness, and we learn that it was Mandak calling him, who's currently with R. In a hilariously fitting ending to Mugen, he figures that they're in hell, and the first thing he asks his old friends is if there are any gods here whose asses he could kick. Even better, we learn that Mansuk and P are here too, so Mugen's not going to be lonely in there. Back in the real world, Mori, Ahan, and Taijin seemingly can't make it in time to enter the portal. But Mugen gives his arch-rival a parting gift by giving Gunduin a boost with one final hit of his trademark Longinus ability. Mori, Ahan, and Taijin are right in front of the portal now, but Ahan thinks they won't make it. So she prepares herself for the worst and tells Mori that they're going to be together until the end. Things go white as the old world is destroyed. But our story arc ends on a cliffhanger when the tale moves the clock forward 17 years into the future, and the last thing we see is Renewal Earth seemingly teeming with life. And that's the final part of the God of High School story. As you might have guessed, this is not the very end as there are a few more chapters left until it is completely done. But for the main story, this is it. Thank you all so much for this journey. The God of High School Manhwa is such an amazing story, and I'm glad to be able to recap all the chapters to you guys. Thank you for your continuous support on the series and of course to my channel. Until next time, we'll see you on the final bonus video of this series covering the final chapters.